All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April 3rd, 2023 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. And we're going to start off this morning with some interviews for Historical Building and Sites Commission candidates. So first, we're going to give him, I'm not sure if he's right outside the door, but we're going to start with Nathan Miller. And I have 5 questions picked out to start with, but then if you all want to jump in with any follow-up questions, we'll have a little time for that.
Hello?
Hello, is that Linda?
Yes, this is Linda.
Okay. We're going to switch back and start with Linda then, Karen. We were waiting for you to sign on, Linda. Okay, everybody. So we're going to switch gears here. We have Linda Cole on the phone via Teams, and so we'll get started with her as planned originally. Linda, we are interviewing candidates for HBSC this morning, so thank you for your application. I have 5 questions for you, and then the council will follow up with any questions that they may have.
All right.
All right, you hear us okay?
Uh-huh.
Okay. First question is, please describe the role of the HBSC Commission and that of a commissioner.
Well, I went online to look it up, and there wasn't a lot about information about it. Because I was trying to do my background and my research. But I know from talking with other people that it just helps with the preservation of the historic downtowns, the historic downtown area, and with the role that it does is, it takes the applications of any development that's going on and to review and approve or disapprove any of the things that are happening downtown.
Thank you. Is there a way to turn up the volume in here at all? And Linda, the second question, why do you want to join the HBSC?
I have a deep love of historic buildings and of Grants Pass, and I would love to be able to be part of the committee and be able to have a little bit of say in what's being happening in our town.
Okay, and what specific experience or knowledge or perspective would you bring to the HBSC? I don't know what kind of experience I have with it other than, working on my own house, which is a historic house, and be able to take care of, preserving what we already have in our area, in our town. Okay. What do you see as important issues of preservation that confront us in the next few years, and why are they important?
As far as the need a map or anything? No. Okay, you're good. Okay. Well, I know we have lots of issues within Grants Pass, but as far as preservation, I know there's just a lot of development going on, and I wouldn't want some of our buildings to fall into disrepair or to have problems, and be able to keep what we have intact and not, let them fall into, people's hands that might not have the same goals and everything that the commission has.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your interest in the HBSC?
No, I just think that it's a wonderful, I'm glad that we have this committee and that they do have the wherewithal to try and preserve our downtown, whereas I know a lot of towns do not have that. And, it's just things have fallen into, have fallen away. And so I wouldn't like that to happen to our town.
Thank you. Council, are there any additional questions you'd like? Valerie?
Yes, welcome, Linda. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development? Do you see a tie between the two?
I think there can be a cohesive mixture of the two, because we can still make developments happen along with preserving our history. It's a kind of a fine line, but I think it could happen, and it would be a good thing to keep the growth going, but also be aware of the preservation that needs to take place.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you for being here, Linda. The council will be making the appointment on Wednesday night this week, and then we will get back to you one way or another and let you know whether or not you've been appointed. Thank you for your application.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
All right, next up is Nathan Miller, and he's coming down. Okay, we'll wait just a minute then.
I'll check because I just read this part. I should know.
Hi, Nathan, welcome. Please step up there and make sure that the light is on at the bottom of the microphone.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right, thank you for applying to be on the HBSC. I'll ask a few questions and then the council can follow up with questions afterwards.
Sounds great.
Please describe the role of the HBSC and that of a commissioner.
Sure. Well, the HBSC is in charge of historic preservations, specifically for our downtown historic district, as well as any sites or buildings that are in the vicinity that are designated historical. And the commissioners on it, they make, well, we talk about a lot of stuff, but and it's all related to downtown and historic preservation. But one of the more important things that happens is whenever there's a hearing related to, it might be new construction or a change or demolition, then it's the commission's job to determine that the change is going to meet the historic guidelines of our city.
Thank you. And why are you interested in serving on the HBSC?
Well, I've been on the commission for 4 years now. I'm surprised that time has blown by so quickly. I've had a good time on it. I feel like we've done some good work. The HBSC has done great work prior to me being on it, and I think it's continued that work while I've been on it for these last 4 years. I'd love to see some of the things that are in progress be seen through. And I think there's some good stuff that's right around the corner, and I'm excited about that. I love being part of it, and well, there we go.
Thank you. What experience or knowledge or perspective do you bring to the HBSC?
Well, aside from being on it for 4 years, I've kind of gotten the hang of it. I understand the rules. I also have a business right downtown, and I spend almost all of my time during the day in our downtown area. So I'm very familiar with the area that the HBSC is in charge of. I've also been through personally a lot of the procedures and hearings that the HBSC is charged with running, because we've had a development downtown where I've been through one of the more challenging processes, which is demolition through new construction and making sure that a new development met those guidelines. So I'm familiar from both the applicant side as well as the other side, the commissioner side. And I feel like that knowledge brings pretty good, it works pretty good for being on there.
Thank you. What do you see as important issues of preservation that confront us in the next few years, and why are they important?
Well, maintaining the historic integrity of our historic district is very important. I think expanding that, hopefully, to include the Northwest Conservation District in the next couple of years is going to be extremely important also, and that's because everyone's familiar with the area up here, kind of the Washington Lawn Ridge area. There's a lot of beautiful homes up there, and they're not protected quite in the way that they should be right now, because there's limited oversight over changes and new construction, and the HBSC can definitely help that when that overlay district takes place.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like us to know about your interest in the HBSC?
I've gotten to know the other members, and I feel like I get along with them well. We've unfortunately, had some tragic turnover in the HBSC, and there's not, there's a lot of new members that are on the HBSC. You're probably interviewing for a couple of those positions here today. So I think it's important to have both new perspectives as well as established perspectives, similar to how you guys do it. So you've got people that know how the processes work. Likewise, you're bringing in new and fresh ideas. So I think those are both commendable ideas.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. And I want to take this opportunity just to publicly compliment you on, you mentioned how your process as an applicant. I know that you did I thought, a really good job absorbing the suggestions that were presented to you in that project, and the project came out great. It would have come out good either way, but it came out better because you were very flexible and willing to listen. But I also know that you're a person that wears a few different hats in town, and your eyes are wide open. Do you have any suggestions or observations of how the HBSC could work better with other committees or commissions?
I think communication is key, and whether it's someone from the HBSC being on multiple committees or at least involved in the discussions of other committees and vice versa, I think is helpful. I think that would help all of our committees just to kind of be in tune with what each other are doing. I do know there's been cases where one committee is doing something, the other committee or commission is unaware of it, and there's a little bit of disconnect where an example is the art that's been going on the 7th Street, all the streetlight boxes. It looks good, it's been put on all those boxes, but there was a misunderstanding, I think, between the COPA Commission that the HBSC didn't want those because they didn't look historic enough, but that was an incorrect, perception at the time, and those could have potentially been put throughout our 6th Street and downtown area as well.
Valerie?
Yes, Nathan, thank you for reapplying. I think you've done an awesome job. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development?
Well, I think our downtown is a draw for tourists. And while it may not feel like there's a direct correlation, history and economics are often spoken of together. I do feel in our city, there's a huge tourist draw to our downtown. I think that when people come to our valley, they might go to the caves and they might go to the river, and they might visit some other things, but they almost always stop downtown. Downtown is a big draw, and so our entire county relies on our downtown being charming, and the historic nature of it is that charming nature that draws people here. So I think that that improves the economy all around it.
Any other questions? All right. just to let you know, with those art boxes, the first 4 were on 7th Street, but there will be more coming. So keep an eye out for those, and we'll try to get COPA and the HBSC working together. We will be making appointments on Wednesday night, so we'll let you know one way or another if you've been reappointed, and thank you for applying.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for your time today. All right, next up we have Desmond Rains. We have people in the super secret holding chamber, so they don't hear the other contestants' answers before the pop quiz. Hello, Desmond. Welcome. Please step on up to the mic here. Thank you for applying to be on our Historic Building and Sites Commission. We are interviewing candidates today, and then we will be making the appointments on Wednesday night, and we'll let you know one way or another if you have been appointed. I have a few questions for you, and then the council may follow up with some others. So the first question, can you please describe the role of the HBSC and that of a commissioner? It's the Historic Building and Sites Commission.
Yeah, when I reviewed the information,
Is there a light on at the bottom of your mic?
sorry. They review plans, and the purpose of the Historic Commission is to review and make sure we keep historic buildings in our community and protect the history of our community, I think is the basis for the commission. They do a lot of different roles, investigation, they do visits, they do public contact, they do make sure that the buildings follow the historic concept that we're going to do, and to make sure that plans that are presented, building plans, do not go against the historic concepts that we want to keep in the community. And the commissioners, the board reports to the commissioners, and the commissioners are the ones that will vote on if it has anything to do with county commissioners. Did you ask me about county commissioners? Is that what
Oh,
question is?
the historic commissioners, sorry.
The historic commissioners. The commissioners will do all the things that I just listed.
Yeah, that one's tricky because it's a commission instead of a committee. We call them commissioners instead of committee members.
I know.
Why do you want to serve on the HBSC? What's your interest in this?
The root of it is that I'm an Oregonian, I'm a native Oregonian, and this is a great place. I was born in Salem, I was raised in Canyonville, was in a stable home for my whole entire life. My parents have moved to be with us in Rogue River, and the concept of history, or the community involvement in history, is one of the most important facts of my life. That little town of Canyonville brought me the foundation that allowed me to do everything I needed. And I say the history is important because the things that history involves are the things that create the foundation for a good community. Building are one point of focus, and that's what everybody comes not everybody, that's what a lot of people come for, tourism. And so tourism is very important. Tourism generates revenue, and the revenue is what impacts the family life in the community. And so I'm not really a politician. I don't want to be a politician, but I thought that this is a way that I could help the community by some of my schooling, some of my background in law. I could help the community on this commission.
Thank you. Can you tell us more about that background? What experience, knowledge, or perspectives you would bring to the commission?
Well, as I said, I grew up in Canyonville. I worked at Roseburg Forest Products while I went to school. I have a 10-year retirement from Roseburg Forest Products. I went to Umpqua Community College for 2 years. I graduated from the University of Oregon with a Bachelor of Science degree. While I was working full-time at Roseburg Forest Products, I drove back and forth to Eugene. After I got out of the University of Oregon, I attended Willamette Law School, and I have a Juris Doctorate from Willamette Law School. That was in 1997. After that time, I did public defender work. I did corporate law for a company over on the coast that did international chemical plants. And so I have a lot of, nationally, I have a lot of three-basin rule experience, which is environmental aspects, but I also have tons of building code research and meeting with commissions and meeting with them before we could build these chemical plants in their city. After that, I went to work for the post office because the job that I had with the chemical company, I traveled all over the world and I had young children, so the job with the United States Postal Service came up, and I was hired off the street as a supervisor at the post office. I worked for the post office for 20 years in various capacities, ran post offices up and down the state, Portland, Vancouver, not Portland Post Office, but substations in Portland. I ran the Vancouver Post Office, Eugene Post Office. Of course, I was a postmaster at Grants Pass. All community involvement situations, and so I know the essence of good community involvement. I just retired 1 year ago from the post office. My wife and I have the business Go Minis, which is portable storage. It's on Park Street, right across from the park. One of the other concerns that I have is concerns kind of like the lawsuit that Grants Pass is embroiled in. And the degradation of the community because there's nothing that we can do. So that's of interest in that. I don't know how much support I could be for the community in that, but this is an area that I feel that I could support the community.
Thank you. What do you see as important issues of preservation that confront us in the next few years, and why are they important?
Well, it's usually the root of preservation or non-preservation boils down to money. And do we have enough capital to keep these buildings the way they are, or change them in such a way, because I believe there's going to be more environmental restrictions that are going to come down the pike that are going to require some changes in individual infrastructure. And we all don't know how the national level politics is going to go from one administration to the next administration, but we all know that there's going to be more emphasis on socioeconomic and environmental factors, and certainly there's a historical perspective that protects us from some of that, but I don't know what the cost basis of that is. So it's going to be very difficult to preserve those historical things that we need for our youth and the youth of today to understand how life was. I'm kind of unknowing about the future, as we all are, but I believe that one of the places that I could benefit this is to be a realist on this, to help this committee, and so that the committee can wind their path through the new regulations or new laws that are going to impact us in the future.
Is there anything else you would like the council to know about your interest in the commission?
Just that my wife and I moved here 10 years ago. We're actively involved in the community and nonprofits, and our business is investing in the community, and not in the community infrastructure, but in the community development, softball, baseball, children's youth activities, children's programs. So we are very interested in the foundation of this community, and it's history. History is a great part of my life, and I value that heritage.
Thank you. Council, do you have any follow-up questions? Val?
I think you kind of answered this in the very beginning, but I'm going to shoot it at you again.
Okay.
Because I shot it at everybody else.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. How do you see the relationship between historic preservation and economic development? So you kind of touched on it in several of your comments.
It's a difficult balance there. And economic development has to happen. You have to have the economic development for your community to survive or to grow or to prosper. Like I said, and I believe there's going to be some new rules and regulations, whether it be from fossil fuels, whether it be from electricity, whether it be from insulation, whether it be we require these things to have in your construction, or however. I think those things are how I could help. I could weave through some of that litigation and some of those regulations and spend my free time on that to help out a little bit. The real problem you guys think is the overburdened government. I mean, there's so many hands in the pie that you guys have a very difficult task, and I think monetarily is going to be one of the biggest issues. Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thanks for your time and applying for the commission. We will be making a decision on Wednesday night and let you know either way, but thank you for applying.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right, we do have 2 appointments to make on Wednesday, everybody. And we will also be appointing to the Urban Tree Advisory Committee as well, but they don't do interviews. All right, next up we have Tamara Martin from the Fairgrounds here, and she has a presentation for us.
Thank you so much. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome, wonderful. I will do my best not to have my back to you gentlemen the whole time. My apologies. My name is Tamara Martin, and officially I'm the Recreation Director for Josephine County. That is a recent title change. I've been the Fairgrounds Director for the last 4.5 years. Very excited to come and chat with you today, as I really have really unique opportunity that we're all facing, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things. Let's see. As most everybody knows, officially, the Flying Lark has been an abandoned lease, and that has transformed back to the fairgrounds. That is on the fairgrounds property, and the original lease actually was designed to benefit the fairgrounds and provide a stable source of revenue for the fairgrounds as we were working towards our master plan. So we now have a very unique opportunity that I'm looking at as an opportunity to really not just benefit the fairgrounds, but really look at this whole opportunity to impact the community as a whole. And so really what I'm doing at this point is looking at everything from, that 30,000 foot view. And I just highlighted in yellow where the Flying Lark is, the YMCA, more for reference so you could see what I'm looking at. This is not just about the building. The building alone, yes, I could absolutely find somebody to lease that building and create a revenue stream for the fairgrounds. But really, truly, our first shot is going to be our best shot. And so I want to make sure that when we're doing this, that I'm not just looking at it through the scope of what's best for the fairgrounds, but looking through it from the scope of what's best for our community as a whole. And by doing this, it really allows me to step outside of the fairgrounds and look from that 30,000-foot view, which is what's next, what's potentially possible in the scope that I haven't thought of before, and is there a way to take this and use the Flying Lark, the building known as the Flying Lark, as a starting gate for a real opportunity for development throughout the entire west side of the fairgrounds and ultimately that entire area. The top priority for myself, as well as the Fair Board, as we go through the different ideas and proposals that we're receiving, is how do we make the largest economic impact to our local community? The highlights, there's really a lot, but really for today's purposes, we have an opportunity for job creation here. When the Flying Lark was prevented from opening, over 200 jobs were lost in a moment. And I'm looking at this as an opportunity of, can we get back to that 200 jobs? Can we grow beyond that 200 jobs? And is there a way to look at this as, again, not just a building, but a full potential opportunity? We also have the opportunity really to create revenue. For the fairgrounds, it's pretty obvious with a lease. For the county, it puts that building back on the tax rolls and allows revenues for them as well. But ultimately, it also offers you an opportunity for revenue as well. Once we get that building up and going, you guys will have increased revenues within your city water, your sewage, increased tourism, events, increases your transient lodging tax, it increased tax opportunities, and reduces budget fall. But let me explain a little bit what I'm talking about, because if you look at it and say, we find a really good partner for that building, yes, we're gonna start using that building, all of these things are gonna happen immediately. But if I can find the right forward-thinking partner, now we're talking about not just that building, but the potential of the entire area, which can increase not just what's there, but opportunities for what could be there. If I can find a right tourism partner, we increase our local tourism dollars, which it also includes our events and our local businesses, the current opportunities that they have. But what we also know is that while we're generating business for the downtowns, we're actually encouraging people to follow their own dreams and open their own business. And this will create an overall healthy economy for all of our citizens. Ultimately, what it comes down to is this really is an opportunity for all of us. And that's how this is being looked at. So in my exploration, what I found, this is a copy of what you guys have set currently in your transportation plan for your Fourth Bridge access. And really what I'm looking at is the access point which encumbers the west side of the fairgrounds and then again this entire area of opportunity. Now this is the old map. What I did, I took a little bit of liberty and I placed it over the current scope of what we already have developed on that lands. As you can see, there's actually already the start of some development opportunity along those ways. A forward-thinking partner for this, again, is going to be looking at the Flying Lark as the opportunity to expand. Could be a hotel, could be an RV resort, could be something I haven't even thought of yet, and I'm open to that possibility as well. But when I'm starting to have these conversations with people that really have the ability to bring that to our community, this has become a stopping point. Because what they're looking at is, oh, wait a minute, how much am I going to invest in this to have it removed 20, 30, 40 years down the road? We have the opportunity to not only maximize this area, but also the opportunity to look at what we can do for the youth sports. We have the soccer fields right there. In addition, we have the walking bridge right over to Reinhardt Park. There's an opportunity here for river access and creation for more river sports and activities as well. This is something that could potentially absolutely raise the entire tourism side on this side of, on the other side, our side of the bridge. And that's really truly the exciting opportunity that I'm looking at. And that's what I'm really here to talk to you guys about today. The ask that I have for you guys today is that it's clear that the fourth bridge is restricting the full potential of this opportunity and could negatively impact not only the fairgrounds, but the city and all of our citizens. I'm requesting that you consider to remove this 20 to 40 year fourth bridge design from your current transportation plan. And by taking this step, you open the full potential for opportunities and create a win-win situation for everybody. Can I answer any questions for anyone?
What questions do y'all have? I guess I'll get started. I know that the fourth bridge has been talked about my entire life. I found news articles dating back to the mid-'80s. It is a Tier 1 project in our transportation system plan for the city to build out access to that fourth bridge over the next 20 years. And so even though the bridge may not happen for a number of years, I think as we see increased development in the Redwood area, it probably needs to happen. In what way is the fourth bridge plan restricting what you want to do at the fairgrounds?
If you look at the overlay of where the bridge and the access point, it's not so much the bridge that is really the problem as much as it's the access design onto the bridge. It encumbers the west end of the fairgrounds, cuts across not only the parking that's currently there, but the horse track itself. And it could prevent the opportunity for full development of, you know, something larger that's not there yet.
So specifically, are you talking about the Park Street connection in the back?
No, I'm talking about the actual west end, the entrance.
The connection at Allen Creek?
Yes, Allen Creek and the end of the fairgrounds property there, as well as the end of the horse track.
Okay. Other questions, Val?
Yeah, in looking at this map, I guess I think that I can definitely see the impact of the I call it the U or whatever it is, that loop-de-loo that was actually pushing Redwood Avenue out. I do know when we did do the minor amendment to the transportation plan, one of the things that they said is they did not think with us doing Dell Road that would have to happen, that was something that could possibly not happen. The one that I'm concerned about, and this is the part that I don't completely know where, but is the Park Street back behind on the back, because I do think that one of the things is we know, you know, how crazy this whole area is over here. We know that we obviously need some help doing it, and I want to say that the Park Street is kind of important because it does alleviate and takes traffic off of Redwood Avenue and makes that. So I don't know whether that is something, you know, that still needs to be taken a look at. I mean, I know we've had multiple discussions about the location of the fourth bridge. I spent last night looking over the transportation plan and, you know, and like you said, at the 30-foot level, sometimes it does make sense to go Schroeder just because of the chaos in that area anyway. So I don't know. I mean, I know the numbers pushed the fourth bridge at that point in time to be the most effective, but 20 years from now when it actually gets built, I'm not sold on that having to be the location, knowing the backup anyway. But I just know that if you're adding all that tourism and all that, ODOT's going to want to have a say in how to alleviate the Redwood Avenue. And so that's the part that I'm concerned about. And I don't know if we can get input from our own transportation people, if they have any ideas. Because I'm all for economic development, trust me, I'm all for it. And I can really see a vision. I can really see that, this could bring a lot of value to our community. But I just want to look at it from the point of view of what, how does that affect that Redwood Avenue road?
And I think at this point, we are still so very much in the preliminary aspects of what we're talking about. And it really is, again, exploring possibilities. But what we're looking at right now is once I have somebody that is, yes, we're interested, yes, here's a proposal, that strikes a whole nother conversation. And I agree, ODOT will be involved, and all of a sudden, everyone will be joining this conversation in a very meaningful way. Because it's most certainly not to, inhibit the access. We, of course, are going to want access to the area. And so what that final plan could potentially look like, I don't know. But what I do know is that when I'm starting to have conversations, there's a real hesitation point looking at this. And, to be able to say to them, hey, look, yes, we know we want a fourth bridge. Yes, we know we need to improve access. But there's still very much a willingness to make room for the economic development opportunities and adjust this plan so that they fit more into the future and what we can actually bring to the community.
Other questions? Dwayne?
Sure, man.
Yeah, I'd say I'm definitely for the economic development of this. And I've never seen this plan here on the map here, and I see a lot of issues with it already. This overlay, not too fond of the way they put these roads and already taking out businesses. There's some new businesses going in right here too, so they're already going to be impacted by this map. So this has got obviously got a lot of flaws to it already. I was told we could always bring this back if we took it off our transportation, and I'm hoping that's correct.
What do you mean take it off?
If we took this off today and we decided, hey, we want to build a bridge in, 20 years, we can always bring it back to the drawing table. And obviously this is just a proposal map anyway, so I have some. Can you tell us anything of what kinds of people are looking at this at all?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Can you tell us what kinds of people or businesses are looking at this?
Sure. I can definitely say that the tourism industry is really going to be the top choice of that area because it does drive so much economy around it that is really kind of that first area that we're looking at. Would love to tie in some ways that we can really preserve some of the support for the horse racing, and some of the initial intent of the building would be phenomenal. But ultimately, it's going to come down to really somebody that can see the long-term vision, that big vision and the big piece to bring them in.
Joel?
Yes, so I was looking at the points that the prospective developers were concerned about. And is it that diagonal that runs between Redwood Highway and Flower Lane? And then also the upgrade of Pansy Lane? Is that the two areas that...
Correct. You're really looking at the corner of Allen Creek, and if you can see, there's that triangle that cuts off the parking with some access into the properties behind towards the river. Mm-hmm. And that's where there's this opportunity of, is there a space, and down the road, can we tie into some of the properties that the county already owns to develop some river access? And so really it's those points on the west end of the fairgrounds that is the primary concern.
Okay, so it looks then too that just redesigning it could not have to relocate the whole bridge to another site.
Sure.
I'm not an engineer, but it looks like all you'd have to do is just re-engineer the existing site.
Correct. I mean, the bridge itself is, for me, I'm not a transportation expert
Yeah,
by
I'm
any
not
means,
either.
so I don't know that, how it works. You know, I can just look at it, and I agree with you, when I look at the map, I go, well, can't we just change this a little bit? But I'm sure there's other people who have a variety of opinions on that. But for my aspect, and what we're looking at for today is really just the access onto the bridge that is creating the challenge.
Sure, okay. Thank you for bringing it to us.
Other questions? Brian?
Thanks, Tamara. So as it sits right now, there's no specific businesses that are looking at this project. You're kind of just doing work ahead of time, or are there?
I do have businesses that I am talking to. I have probably about 4 different avenues that I'm traveling down right now to look to see what the best possible use would be. 2 of them really just benefit the fairgrounds. And so, you know, that is a possibility. But gosh, I just look at such a huge splash that could be made, and what we could really just now look at a full community benefiting from, not just the fairgrounds. And that's why I'm coming to you today.
Okay. I heard kind of maybe through the rumor mill, you could say that one or more than one of the opportunities could be a hotel attached to the Flying Lark. Is that accurate?
I don't know that I would go that far. You know, I can say that they're exploring to see if that's a possibility, whether it be in that area or close nearby. You know, there's an opportunity of like, can we create a marriage here where there could be a hotel or RV resort, you know, but a lot of that looks at, you know, can we get to river access? So a lot of those possibilities really are going to kind of hinge on what's possible around that space. And it's difficult to say. I have not received a proposal currently yet that includes those, but because they wanted to see if the city council was willing to look at this and potentially remove it before they got that far.
Okay, thanks.
Valerie?
Well, I was just going to say, like I said, it's my kind of understanding, and maybe Wade and Jason could kind of clue in, is when we did do the original amendment in December, there was the fact that because that U was never something that the city wanted. The city way back when said, nope. As a matter of fact, that's what stopped ODOT from completing that third, was because the city people at the time said, we do not want to disrupt the businesses in that part of town. And so that's why ODOT did not do the original third phase all the way to the city, was because of that, the local community not wanting that U. So when we did do the allowed for the change on Dowell Road, that kind of, at that time, ODOT said, well, that could very well mean that we don't need to do that, which would automatically free up that one corner. And once again, I know Wade is now in the room, and I see, you know, something. The Park Street is the one that I'm only worried about. And does the county own those 2 lots on the river, both?
No, county owns the lot at the end of West Park Street. If you're looking at your, this final map.
Can you
the
bump the
overview?
slide back,
Yeah, go
like
backwards on
one
the slide, so
one
yeah.
slide there?
Backwards.
Slide back. Can you go backwards?
Pardon?
Oops.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry
there we
about
go.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know I could go backwards. Can you see the mouse?
Yes.
All right, so this property right here, the county owns, and this is at the very end of West Park Street. And as well as the county owns the Allen Creek area that goes all the way across. These 2 properties are currently owned by Travis Boersma or TMB Racing, and there's, you know, potential there, of course, as this project has been abandoned, to maybe look at purchasing those.
So,
And that covers these 2 properties right here.
okay.
So the access, if we were to acquire those, would be from this point going really neat walking bridge or something along the back over to the West Park Street.
Okay. That's a pretty steep in terms of river access, am I correct?
Currently, yes.
Yes, that's what I thought. And then I guess the thing that I don't understand is the one is that can't even read it. The one that comes down and loops around into that one, Red Street. Oops.
This?
That one, I'm assuming, is kind of the,
This is just, if this is the one that you're talking about, this is just a driveway as it transitions down into the property.
okay. And the red one right there, is that the continuation, the red street, double line street, is that the continuation of
Looking at.
Park?
So you could be pointing and talking. There you go.
Okay. So the continuation of the double line, is that this?
Is that
what you're
Park
talking- This
Street?
is, yeah, this is Park Street. It looks
And
like
that's
it's just
coming
a
off
little
the- is
bit
that-
off.
Yeah, is that property coming off of the Public Works lot? Is that what that is right there?
Yeah, this is the
Okay.
backside of the fairgrounds. So currently along this, you got the soccer fields. This is a gravel lot that's currently used by horse racing as an RV park
Okay.
during their seasons. And off-season, we just use it for overflow parking.
Okay, and Park Street comes down, and then, I guess what I don't completely understand, it runs into Allen Creek, correct?
Yes.
And I guess right to the right of that, I'm not sure what that little thing is that goes from the fairgrounds, the one that looks like a
The Pansy Lane, I think.
Pansy Lane? I can't read that because is that Pansy?
Just right
Yeah, I
next
think
to the
it's Pansy
TMB
Lane.
property, the little tail.
Yeah, that right there.
My understanding is that this was supposed to be access off of Park Street so that people could get back onto this parking lot for the YMCA and access to the businesses on this side of the fairgrounds. We are looking at the fairgrounds in our master plan as some connectivity aspects so that there are more multiple ways to actually get onto the fairgrounds to try and reduce some of the traffic going directly into Redwood Highway. But that's my understanding is what this was for. This is Park Street, and then obviously heading onto the bridge, which then would allow people to get back to the fairgrounds.
But couldn't they automatically I'm just looking at Allen Creek. I'm just trying to figure it all out in terms of the importance of Park Street alleviating the problem with Redwood Avenue. And so, like I said, I still think that's an important part of it, and I guess I was going to have Wade came in
yeah,
after my question.
Since
If you-
Tamara's not our street
Yeah, and
expert here, we
Yeah,
can
I was-
have
that's why well, I saw
public
Wade
works.
walk in, and I know
Yeah.
Wade is our expert, so I guess I wanted him to comment on that.
Yeah, so West Park Street is really critical because, folks can not go out to use the South Y, which is kind of the whole purpose of the fourth bridge is to alleviate the traffic that goes through the South Y, if you will. So West Park Street needs to get built before the bridge goes in, really, because without it, it doesn't work the way it's designed to. A lot of these designs, Tamara is absolutely correct. This was a sketch drawn around the time that the Flying Lark was going in through development. So as things have changed, some of that stuff doesn't make sense. And you are absolutely right, Counselor, that the bump out of Redwood Avenue is not necessary now. We moved that in the last TSP amendment to a Tier 3 project, which is, it's still in there, but we have no plans of funding it whenever that project comes through.
And I also wanted to clarify that the Tier 1 building, which is the Park Street, and the foundation for the bridge is in Tier 1, but the actual bridge is in Tier 3. And so
Yep. Yeah, we have the fourth bridge approaches are in Tier 1, which would also be on the Lincoln Road side. So it would build all of the approaches and everything. So all the infrastructure is in, and then you could just place the fourth bridge in there. But we didn't have the funding for that. That's a $50+ million actual bridge.
Yeah.
We'd be looking for grants for that.
Okay, and I just have a question, because I did pore over the transportation plan, and I look at Lincoln Road coming across and realize that on the Lincoln side, right, it will be the bridge that, going over the bridge will be right abutting to Reinhardt Park, am I correct?
That is correct. And then the next project that we're looking to fund through the Middle Road Metropolitan Planning Organization and receive funding for the next 5 years is to upgrade Lincoln Road between Lower River Road, G Street and M Street.
Okay, and
No
then
bridge, sorry.
And then I did have one more question, if it's okay. I was going to ask about the Schroeder Bridge. Schroeder Bridge and the Schroeder Park goes from Schroeder, which is at that Edgar Lane or something. I think there's a lane that goes right down there. And where does it connect on the other side? When we looked at that?
We're not real sure how that's all going to tie together yet.
It was something that we looked at in the transportation system plan to evaluate which one of the bridge options was most effective to take vehicles off of the South Y. So we looked at it from a really high level planning perspective, but we don't know what that bridge would look like.
Okay.
I think it would just connect directly to Lower River Road is what I saw.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was Lower River Road and over, so.
Yep, and potentially a connection north up to Pinecrest from there too, could make some sense.
Okay.
Vanessa?
Thank you, Wade, for being here. I was hoping you could talk for a moment about arterial collectors that are being funded through ODOT in the area, Allen Creek, and the potential for Lincoln Road, that kind of funnels vehicles into the Fourth Bridge where we've, uninformally decided where it should go. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so two of the larger transportation projects that we're going to do here within the next decade or two is going to be Allen Creek Road, which is mostly funded. I think it's 80% federal funded. ODOT is doing the administration on it. And we're looking to construct that next summer, I think is where we're trending right now. And then the next one in the queue is Lincoln Road, which would also be mostly federal funded. There's a couple $1 million in federal funding in it right now. It's the next congestion mitigation air quality project. We felt it was important to get the infrastructure in place on both sides of the bridge before you put a bridge in. Otherwise, it'd be really tough to handle the volume of traffic, especially on the north side of the river.
Is it fair to say that we're really developing around the area of the Fourth Bridge in anticipation for this location?
Yeah, that's kind of why we have these long-range planning documents. If you didn't have this in place, then when development occurred along those corridors, you wouldn't be able to try to acquire the right-of-way or the easements required for it. So, I mean, you guys are absolutely right. We all know that this isn't going to get built in the next 40 years, but that's why you need to do the long-range planning.
And what would something like removing it from our plan entirely do for our future plans?
Well, we would probably have to try to find a new location for it, which is something that we can do. And if you guys want to do that, we can pick a new location and then we'll start planning there. But we'd just be a little bit behind because we've been planning at this location for 20 years or so.
Personally, I see it being more insurmountable than the picture that you just painted, but I do appreciate your optimism. Thank you.
Any other questions right now? All right, I think if council's interested in taking a close look at Fourth Bridge plans, we should plan another work session around that idea. But any questions for Tamara while she's here? All right, thank you for being here. Oh, Brian.
I'm sorry, I have a question for Jason or Wade.
Okay.
I know that in this year's budget, we have a study for the Fourth Bridge funded. Has that begun, or where are we at on that?
It has not yet. The gas tax revenues came in a little bit behind what we were hoping for, and so that one got shorted a little bit in the last year. So it's in the budget for the following, or this coming budget as well, to start accumulating the funds for it. But we had to short some projects, and that's the one that we're looking to short right now.
So does that mean that it's just getting pushed to the next budget year?
Yeah, and it still isn't scheduled to be fully funded in the next budget year either. I'm anticipating about $1 million for that study, and we're not there yet.
I got a question.
Okay.
But we're
Thank you.
planning on it.
Okay, thanks.
Dwayne and then Rick.
I think my question's for them is, did we ever do a traffic study? How much traffic's gonna be pushed to this area? And what was the
Yes.
outcome of that traffic study? Because it doesn't, we already have a problem there right now anyway. I mean,
This
just
is
sounds
where
like a really bad problem.
We don't have staff prepared to get into these kind of questions today, so that's why I'm saying if council's interested in reviewing the Fourth Bridge, we should plan another work session around that because,
I think they're looking for an answer too right away.
yeah. Rick?
So the section of Lincoln Road that's to be improved, that's basically non-standard right now, so it needs improvement irregardless. Is that a valid viewpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it is classified as an arterial as it stands today. Now, I would argue that if the Fourth Bridge was not going to connect to it, it may make sense to consider downgrading it from an arterial. But either way, it is substandard. It's a typical county road right now with 2 narrow travel lanes and roadside ditches.
So in our further presentation, be nice to go into a little more detail on that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, sounds like there's a lot of interest and questions. We should plan a whole workshop around plans for the Fourth Bridge and those connecting streets. Aaron?
So are you also wanting to have additional questions or topics with regards to what was presented today, or you want to just focus on transportation and the Fourth Bridge? Because there's 2 pieces like you were trying to parcel out, Mayor, and that is the economic question and then also the Fourth Bridge Transportation System Plan question. Just, I want to make sure we're hitting the target for you as a council. Do we address both of those at the next workshop, or are we just addressing the TSP? So just wanting to get additional information.
Yeah, what questions do you have, Joel?
So the key question for me is, can you keep the Fourth Bridge where it's at and just redesign? And what does that look like? And that, you may not be able to answer that, I don't know, but is that possible? Is that a possibility? And I would guess that it would be.
Well, some of the, I'm not the engineer, but from my conversations with our engineers, yeah, some of that might be able to be redesigned to some degree, but Park Street is really the key to that whole piece. And that is also a key to something that I think what I'm hearing today is that would be nice if it was eliminated from being a piece running through there.
I was wondering,
like
you could have a overpass or an underpass through there as well. I mean, in bigger cities, they have that all the time, going down to the river.
Just for a few extra million, I'm sure.
Well, no, you're just talking about a 2-lane road, or maybe even a 4-lane road, but.
Okay, I think that we need to get an understanding of what is going on with all the road system before we can probably begin to address whether we want to make changes for how things might accommodate the fairgrounds requests, sounds like to me. Does anybody have anything else they want to throw in there? Okay.
I guess my question is timeliness. If it, that's something that I think has some, say in this, because there's a timeliness factor as well. And I don't know, I mean, if per se somebody wanted to come in and put a hotel there, I'm going to assume they're going to have to do a TIA or not, because was there a TIA done when the Flying Lark was put in there? So would that one would that fit the bill for somebody being in, or would they have to redo it because it's adding capacity? That's my question.
Yeah, the TIA, has certain trigger points in our development code. So really depending on what it is, we would have to look at the difference between the assumptions that were in the TIA that was already done and the increased traffic that would be generated by a new use. So that's really what we would have to look at to determine whether another TIA would be needed.
Okay, and then I have one more question, and I guess this will be answered later, but on the park connection, is there a reason it is that far from the river? I mean, looking at, could the county give a little and take some of that Park Street off of their RV park plan? I'm just saying, give and take, just throwing it out there.
All right, we will try to get this scheduled as soon as we can so that we don't delay progress unnecessarily. It was something that was on our potential strategic plan that obviously we're needing to deal with here. Let's see, next up on our agenda is Allen Wood Residential Development. Brad's coming up for that one. I don't have a future agenda. Do any of you have a future agenda? Okay. If somebody could get us Okay, well, just when we get to agenda review, Val says she doesn't have one either. Stuck to something? Okay. Brad, take it away.
Good morning. So you, as a council, have talked about the Allenwood property twice before. This is an update. A few things have happened since your last conversation, so we're going to kind of give you an overview of that today. I've got my name on there, but we also have Amber Neek, our housing and neighborhood specialist, who is here, Mark Trinidad, our planning manager. The three of us are here and available for questions for you. So the subject in summary today is really those two main points there. Update you on a wetlands delineation and traffic analysis, and then review potential next steps for a scope of work for a request for proposal. Here's the area. Council's pretty familiar with it. I mainly wanted to pull this back up. What's in green here is the subject parcels. There's 3 of them. But just to remind you that this is the very edge of the urban growth boundary as it is now. So the city doesn't control anything on the west side of the subject properties. Here's just a zoom in on the aerial view. It's undeveloped, used to have a house on it. That's been removed. The 2 parcels that are up here at the top actually have some frontage on the Allenwood Drive, which is a cul-de-sac on the west terminus there. This is the same background that council saw before. City acquired this in 2005 for about $1 million. It was added in 2010 to the city's Park and Rec Master Plan as park reserve land. Then in 2019, the PAVE committee that put together the 42 properties and analyzed those 42 properties of surplus property did include this property with a recommendation to potentially sell some of it, but to retain the portion that's adjacent to Allen Creek as parkland. The last bullet there, proceeds from any sale will need to go back to Parks Land Acquisition SDC Fund. JC did a little bit of research on that, and if you had more specific questions, can maybe get into that. But the vast majority of that purchase price did use Parks SDC back in 2005. So here's just the main background, some of the key dates. The Housing Advisory Committee reviewed this in February of 2022. And they did recommend an R3 zone as well as retaining some open space, which was similar to the PAVE committee recommendation. Then in April of 2022, you expressed support for an RFP. June of 2022, we met with Greg Jacoby, who I see is here today, if you have any questions. There's really no immediate development interest. They have 6.6 acres that are immediately adjacent to the south. That was one of the topics of your June meeting. Then in August, council directed staff to proceed with the wetland delineation. This is kind of part of the incentivization of getting the property ready for development. There was some support at your August meeting for an R2 zoning. No decision was made to proceed with that, but there was a comment about possibly looking at some kind of memorandum of understanding regarding future access to the south there. October of 2022, we had Schott and Associates hired. They did the wetlands delineation. January of this year, DEA, who's our city transportation engineer, did the traffic assessment. And then in February, Schott completed their wetlands delineation. It was just a little bit too uncertain in October because of we really had not had much precipitation. So they really, in order to be accurate with the delineation, they wanted to kind of come back and reassess it. So that's the reason why you see that break there between October and February on the wetlands. So a couple of the key findings that came out of that delineation, basically there's two large areas that came back as being wetlands. There's 2 upland ditches, there's the South Highline Irrigation Canal, and then the creek. So the total acreage right now is 1.12 acres. The key thing to remember on these wetlands is they do have to get verified by the Department of State Lands. So they have not done their full evaluation of the private ecologist study yet. That's getting submitted and usually takes a few months for the state to come back and say, yeah, we agree or we disagree. You know, it's possible that they come back with some changes. We don't know what those would be yet. The wetland number 1 extends on-site to, and does have an outlet to the irrigation canal, and then wetland 2 is more of just kind of at the base of a little depression in the property there at the bottom of the soil, and it does not have any outlet. So here's the map that Schott and Associates came back with. So again, you have Williams Highway on the right side of the screen. The red outline is the property boundary. The light blue cross-hatched is the wetlands, and you can see the majority of it is about 1.04 acres. This is wetland number 1, the largest one, which does have an outlet to the irrigation canal, and then the smaller one, wetland 2, is 0.09 acres. That's kind of right in the middle of the site there. There is, probably tough for you to see, but there is quite a bit of contour that happens, you know, kind of in this southeast corner. Those white lines. It's fairly hilly there, but as you know, the majority of this is pretty flat. There did not end up really being any delineated wetlands adjacent to the creek because of the topography there. It's pretty steep, so you really don't have any wetlands to focus on there because of the topography. On the transportation side, the good news is that even if you project out to like a kind of a mid-level R2, there probably wouldn't be a trigger for a full-blown TIA. DEA looked at several different options in this. Their assumptions are listed here. There's 9.7 acres, and if you take out the 1.12 for wetlands, that leaves you 8.6 gross buildable acres on the property. The existing zoning, which is R18, would get you right around 33 trips, or dwelling units, I'm sorry. And then the 0.94 is what the International Transportation Engineer Manual uses for a single-family house, how much it generates per day. So 33 times 0.94 gets you around 30 trips per day. So if you went with more of a potential middle housing type mix, and you would jump that up to, say, 67 dwelling units on the property, also using 0.94, which is very conservative because there's some middle housing products, you know, that you don't actually have to go that high. Like for example, triplexes and fourplexes, you would use more like a 0.74 or 0.75 factor, and but that still puts you around 63 trips per day. So their conclusion was that the growth that would be anticipated, even at the middle housing type, wouldn't trigger a TIA. They did mention, you know, the emergency and secondary vehicular access being a really key consideration. I think you already knew that. We talked about that before. They also noted that our currently adopted TSP does have the 3 lanes and the bike lanes on Williams Highway. You're probably familiar with it. It tapers right now as you come down Williams. It's 3 lanes. It has the middle turn lane all the way on Williams, but as you get right to this property, it tapers down so that there is no middle turn lane that's in front of this property. So, you know, that would likely be a condition of approval. So we looked at a little bit more at the option of going with a rezone as compared to leaving it at the R18. And both Housing Advisory Committee and Council talked about that, as given previous consideration. Either the R2 or the R3 would require a comprehensive plan amendment. That would change it from low density to moderate density. At the end of the day, what we're really talking about is spot zoning, because if you do a comprehensive plan amendment, which, you know, you certainly could do, you know, we talked before about, do you do it on just this property, or would you do it on multiple properties? Obviously, the larger area that you're talking about, the more feasible it kind of becomes to do. The R2 and the R3 do allow for multifamily, the 5+ units. If you left it as it is, the middle housing, you wouldn't be able to build anything more than 4plexes on the property. So that is a key difference, as well as the minimum lot size changes quite a bit. The minimum lot size in the R18 is 6,000 square feet. The R2 and the R3 go down to 3,500 and 2,500 respectively. Any zone other than that R18 creates the spot zone. The nearest higher density zone to this property is about 2,000 feet to the north. That's right at the intersection where where New Hope comes in, which is zone commercial up there. Since you can build the triplexes, you can build the quadplexes in the R18, and you have the planned unit development that you could use to shrink the lot sizes. Staff's consideration at this point would be to just kind of retain the zoning as it is, because you could get, and there's, like I say, there's really not any other middle housing or multifamily anywhere in the area. So, moving ahead, what would maybe an RFP scope look like? These are some considerations. City to retain ownership of 1 to 2 acres contiguous to Allen Creek for a future municipal park. That would be consistent with HAC's early recommendations, as well as the PAVE Committee's recommendation. There would obviously need to be a phrase in there, a provision to cooperate with the city on doing a property line adjustment to make that. There wouldn't need to be a land split, because there's already 3 parcels there. So you could just use the existing parcels and just do a property line adjustment to get that. In terms of timing on that, you could proceed now to do that, but it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest, because you really don't know what a future developer's layout's going to be, and it's pretty highly likely that you would do a property line adjustment now, and it would probably not be in the exact location that would work. So our thought is just do it at the time, whenever a future developer comes back. We've got in there that the RFP would say to achieve a minimum overall density of 8 dwelling units per acre. The R1, that's certainly more than the R18, but it's significantly less than if you did an R3, which of course has the minimum density requirement. So 8, if you just do an overall, would require you to have a developer to have some mixed housing products. You could not get to 8 dwelling units per acre with just single-family detached housing. There would have to be some other product. Another potential provision in the scope could be to construct mixed-use housing with at least 10% as middle, potentially putting a maximum AMI on there, at least 10% made affordable to 80% AMI. Again, if you certainly don't have to, as a council, require that there be any affordability piece to this, but if there was a mandatory affordability piece, then CET money could potentially be used. Another key piece is that connectivity to the south, and requiring cooperation with the adjacent owner to the south to provide at least one public street stub, so that there can be some future connectivity there. Ensuring a PED bike connection to the future park from the residential development, that would just be ensuring that it's not completely landlocked in there, so that the only way to the park wouldn't be to go to Allenwood, that you could get to it from internally. And then last but not least would be project phasing acceptable but at least 20 units expected within 2 years, and that's just trying to get at the council's goal for, we really want housing. So we don't want you to just sit on this property forever. Here's some scoring considerations in the RFP that would kind of get to a couple of those main points. You could award points by a percentage of maximum density, by a percentage of affordable units, adding points for community partnerships that would kind of speak to workforce housing, and then also potentially awarding points for commitment to environmental sustainability within the project, solar, energy efficient appliances, things like that. And here are a few potential next steps. Real estate appraisal or formal evaluation. You have done both. I think on the, we did get a formal appraisal on the Harbeck property. But on some of the others, we've just gotten a couple of real estate valuations, sort of formal valuations on those. Potentially do a phase 1 environmental analysis, geotech report. The geotech report certainly wouldn't need to be done, but it was thrown in there because of the wetland delineation did show, just a pretty significant area, and not just where it's with wetlands delineation, but where there's some pretty high groundwater. And just to ensure that we're not asking for something that's unrealistic if somebody comes back and says, the soils here just aren't going to allow for as much density as you're asking for, city. That would help us to know ahead of time. You had talked previously about, well, how are we going to include the neighborhood in this? At this point, of course, there hasn't been any kind of mailing, any kind of notification to anyone. So that may be something you want to consider. Calculate the specific amount of the parks SDC repayment. We know that it's right up there around that $1 million, but we would want to bring back to you after analyzing it just to give you a hard number. We can draft a detailed RFP, bring that back to you, and then potentially release it. Here's some of the cost implications to date. That wetlands delineation was about $6,000. The DEA, because we already have them on contract, that didn't cost us anything. The real market value of these properties is just a couple years old, $740,000, just over $740,000 for all three. And then we've already mentioned the proceeds going back to Parks Land Acquisition SDC Fund. And this is at your discretion. There's a couple alternatives for you, Mayor and Council, to consider.
Thanks, Brad. What questions do you all have? Rick?
Thank you, Brad. You mentioned in the calculations that the wetlands were pulled out when it applied to the density factor.
For the transportation analysis?
Okay, but otherwise, the wetlands would still be used as allowable acreage for achieving the density they wanted? Or do they have to go to a PUD and include the wetlands?
Well, it's certainly possible that the wetlands could be included. You mean in terms of the buildable area? It's just
no, included the acreage for the acreage density calculation.
For the density. Okay, yes, correct. The net was taking out the 1.1 acres of wetlands.
Right. So my question is, do they have to go to the format of a PUD to include the wetlands acreage in that density, or it doesn't matter?
I don't think it would matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And last question. In order to achieve some of the density, if it did not go to an R2 zoning, would the ADU allow that second dwelling on the lot anyhow? So even though it stayed the same zoning, they could essentially achieve 2 dwelling units per parcel?
Sure. I mean, and of course now it's, you can do 2 ADUs detached by our code for any single family lot, as long as you can meet all the setbacks.
So could the council also consider putting that as a condition?
To have mandatory ADUs?
Yes.
I guess anything's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Dwayne?
Rick was kind of on the same line I was. I was wondering, can we mandate them to do at least so many quadplexes or something there? I mean, to maximize density without costing so much money to change the R2, but we want to have so much of this as quadplexes or whatever else to maximize the housing we can and keep the price down. That's just something I thought about, but kind of with this ADU thing, but I don't know, maybe a certain section of it is, you know, quadplexes or something, so.
Sure, Councilor, we kicked around that idea at staff as well. You know, you've got this wetlands right in the middle, you know, that could be built around. You could back up houses that could become part of your open space. The quadplexes, to actually pick a number out of the air and say you have to do X number of quadplexes, we came down to there's maybe some advantages to giving more latitude to a developer to as long as, so just shoot for that density overall. So if they wanted to do a mix of duplexes and some triplexes, or maybe they want to come in and do more single with, you know, we just don't know what they.
So we could probably do, right now it's been 30 and 66 is.
Right.
We could say, hey, you're going to put down, I don't know, 50. We could tell them to do that, dwelling units. Could we ask them to do that on their proposal?
You can. I mean, as far as an RFP goes, there's really no, you know, regulatory guideline on what that is. It's more about, you know, what is the end product that you want to see. And if you definitely want to see some fourplexes, then you'd probably want to include that in the RFP. But if the thing is overall number of units and affordability, or, you know, giving a developer more design options, then you would probably just use the overall density rather than say we want this number of fourplexes or we want this number of triplexes. But
Okay.
you certainly have the option.
Thank you.
Valerie, then Brian?
Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose of incentivizing, because basically, if you put the incentives there and you score them according to whether they grabbed onto those, then ultimately, we're going to choose who gets the RFP. So that would come up in the point system. I just know that regulatory sometimes constrains. So my question was about this proceeding and how we take money. Say we have this, you know, piece of land and we want to give a deal because we have this piece of land, but what if we don't get any money? How do we reimburse to the SDCs? So I'm just kind of curious how that happens.
I think I waited enough this time. So yeah, me and Augustus went through this, and I'll actually cite the ORS that we're going to go through. There's actually not something specifically that calls this out in ORS, OAR, or CFR, or anything like that. But ORS 233.302 reads, if a local government expends revenues from SDCs in violation of the limitations described in ORS 233.307, the local government shall replace the misspent amount with monies derived from sources other than system development charges. Replacement monies must be deposited in a fund designated for system development charge revenues, not later than 1 year following a determination that the funds were misspent. Now, after reading that, the key term there is misspent. So the original intent was to put parkland on there. And so since you are changing how you're going to use this land, then we are kind of fitting that into this ORS as it's an original misspent of Parks SDCs.
So you're saying it's misspent. So in other words, you're saying that, I guess I'm not clear. So by using part of it for housing, we are using part of it for a park, but we're just decreasing the size of the park, is what we're saying. So we need to take the difference between what we're leaving in the park. Is that, or do we have to put all of it into there?
Supposedly, you've got to put all of it back at the $1.04 million that was originally spent. Now, I have reached out to other accountants across the state, and no one's kind of come across this similar situation yet.
I talked with Josh, who is our parks person, a couple weeks ago, because we were talking about Beacon Hill. Same thing. If you're going to take that park, shrink it shrink the park and do some housing around it, you're gonna, how can you do it? And he said there were some creative ways, so you might talk to him about things and incentives or whatever you can do. And especially in this housing crunch that we're in, you'd think they'd have some sort of a, anyway.
Correct, but it all depends on how the park was originally funded and purchased too. So if that same park wasn't funded through SDCs, it doesn't have the same restrictions that we may have with this one, which was almost 100% bought with SDC money.
Okay, and I think Beacon Hill was also almost 100% bought with SDC money, if I'm not mistaken. So, okay, I just want to know how that works. So you're basically saying in order to refund it, we'd have to sell it for the amount, otherwise money would have to come out of our general fund, or what? Do we have someplace else it can come out of?
Or you couldn't use the proceeds to do whatever you wanted to do. It'd have to go back to SDCs first, and you would have to give it back to Parks SDCs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, clarify. No, I don't.
Yes, to answer your question, yes, if we sell this or do any kind of incentivization, we'd have to make the SDC system whole again, so it has to go back to Parks. The one part of the conversation I wasn't involved in between JC and Augustus was, if this property is deemed, when we purchased it, we spent $1 million on it, but now the property's worth $2 million. What about the growth in the value? Does that also have to be accounted for back to the Parks SDC, or is that growth something that the city can then work as an incentive for development of density levels?
Yeah, and what me and Augustus talked about, it looks like per the ORS, only the 1 million or 1.04 million would be eligible. However, there is a little bit in the back of people's minds of, is that washing certain funds, the time and value of Parks SDCs? Because if we wouldn't have paid that money from Parks SDCs from the get-go, it would have earned interest over time, and ergo that fund base would have grown too. So you're in a weird state kind of in the middle area there, but legally it looks like just the 1.04.
Just to add to that, so ultimately, I think I know where council's wanting to go with this. I think most defensible methodology moving forward is that if we were to say that there's a market value of $2 million on this property, we purchased it for $1 million, then we take a look at the time of when the purchase was, we look at the interest that would have accrued over the time between the purchase and now, we credit that to the System Development Charge Fund, and the remaining is something council can incentivize development with. That would probably be the most defensible methodology to utilize.
Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. On one of the slides, you mentioned emergency and secondary vehicular access as a key consideration, and I know that this site currently only has the Allenwood Drive access. And I know that you mentioned that there's the potential for a future access point to the south through the Jacoby property. I'm just wondering, that's something we're probably gonna have to figure out before we get too far here. Is there also other potential for secondary access as far as, I know in other places on Williams Highway, at least one or two other places, there's kind of like a one-lane emergency access. Is there the potential for something like that here?
In talking with ODOT, we think there is. You know, they have jurisdiction on that frontage and they control access. But yes, we think there's that opportunity.
Okay, thanks.
Joel?
So Brad, given the RFP and its limitations on density and also limitations on income for the, they've suggested, I think it was 20% total, 10% of affordable housing and 10% of low-income housing. Do we anticipate that the bid of the RFP, the minimum bids, would be over what we would owe back to the park fund?
Right. Well, given what we just heard from JC and Aaron, I think that would, you know, since you don't have the general fund as a revenue source to replenish the original, then yeah.
So the question I'm asking is your professional judgment in this RFP, then will we get a minimum bid that will give us the money needed to reimburse the park fund?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't want to get my crystal ball out too much on that. I mean, you know, developers are going to be doing their pro formas, and they're going to, you know, run the numbers and see, okay, if this is the absolute minimum asking price of the city, then, you know, what's it going to cost me to build this number of units and to put in this infrastructure? And so, yeah, I mean,
So then are we going to put in a minimum asking bid then? Okay.
We would, yeah. Yeah, I think so.
You would need to do that and/or subsidize whatever minimum is below what we have invested into the general fund.
Right.
Brian?
So just to kind of follow up on Joel's point, maybe a little bit more detail as far as, or I guess the question is, with this property, if we gave a developer the potential to put more units on, as far as, you know, if one scenario they can only put 30 units on and another scenario they could put 50 or 60 or whatever, would it likely be more valuable to them if they were able to put more units on the property?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right. DJ?
Yeah, so as far as that goes, this is all potential at this moment. Anything else of supposing what could be done there is plain tiddlywinks. It's R18, it could be R2, it could be R3. Put the RFP out, demonstrate that we want density, we want affordability, and get a response from your market. It's just that straightforward.
Dwayne?
I think DJ said exactly what I was thinking is, we could do a lot of hypothetical right now, but we'll send an RFP out there, see what they're gonna give us. We're the ones gonna make the decision. None of us are gonna be developing this property or making plans, so let's throw it out there, stop talking about it, and see what they're gonna give us. And then we can always come back to them if there's not what we want. I mean, at this point, we could talk about this all day without knowing what developers want to do with the property. We know we want lots of housing, so let's just go ahead and say, hey, put as much houses as possible in there. That's just how I feel. I feel we waste a lot of time trying to dictate if it's R2, R18, whatever else. We know we want housing. We need a lot of housing. So hopefully we get some bids back right away.
Val?
I guess my question is do we need to do the, have them do the formal valuation from realtors and the phase one and the geotechnical report? That would be the next question, whether you wanted us to do those or not, correct?
I think in terms of the, I mean, if the council's direction is to just prepare a detailed RFP, then, you know, we could certainly potentially run two things simultaneous. I mean, you could run the RFP and then we could continue to do some of the other, the valuation piece.
Okay.
But yeah, most likely we'd want to see that valuation first. I don't know, maybe Aaron's got some other thoughts on that, but I think we would, you know, it's been many years since we've had a good valuation on it, and especially now that we have good wetlands delineation, I think that'll be helpful.
You're talking about like an appraisal evaluation, or are you talking, or when you say evaluation, what?
Either, yeah, either
or the
real estate
realtor,
or
yeah. So I think I concur with Brad. I think ultimately, ideally, listening to what council is talking about in the spirit of Councilor Fraser and what he mentioned also, maybe the next step would be that council, if they're interested, we would develop and draft an RFP. Okay. We'd draft an RFP and we'd also get an idea, an estimate of value for the property. So you'll be looking at both when we come back to you with the RFP. The RFP would then state that the city is selling this property at the 1 point, whatever the $1 million value is, to refresh the System Development Charge Fund. Then we would also have an evaluation of the property. Maybe the property's $2 million. You're not asking for $2 million. You're only asking for the minimum of this, potentially asking for the minimum of what is needed to go back in the System Development Charge. And let's say there's $500,000 difference. That is what you're incentivizing, highest, best use density levels in that development. And that's what is the incentivization piece for the developer. And so then you're looking at and keeping it as open as possible, because we're not developers, but let the developers come to us with plans on how they're going to meet the highest and best density. And so I see that as being the piece. We'll get an evaluation of the property, we'll develop an RFP, we'll give you the numbers on what the minimum would be required to go back to the system development charge, and then you'll have an idea of what we'd be incentivizing if you're only selling it for what we need to pay the SDC fund back.
Okay. That makes sense.
Rick?
So if the appraisal came back at 3 million, we wouldn't have to stick with we could choose 1.5 or 2 million instead, right?
Yeah, let's say it's doubled or tripled in value.
Right.
You can reassess that, and because there could be something, you don't want to leave something on the table. You want to make sure you're incentivizing to get to where you want to go, but that may not require the whole amount.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so is everybody comfortable with Aaron's suggestion of drafting the RFP and getting the estimated value at the same time, coming back to us? All right, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Brad, for the presentation. Got all our questions answered, ready to move on to public safety funding. Who is tackling that one? JC. I should do a mayoral proclamation that during these dead times, the camera looks at something other than me, but thank you.
Don't go far, I mean. It's not sharing. Oh. See? Good? Oh.
Success.
It's elaborate today, I'm sorry. Multiple people. So I'm going to go over some public safety funding. Today, if this goes forward. All right. We're going to go over some additional utility fee information. I've asked John from the FCS group to come in as an outside consultant to talk about potential rates, studies, and/or building. So we've talked about methodologies that we already have, and they are based on some kind of nexus to service. But if you feel like none of those previously presented rate types aligns with public safety, then he's going to talk about what it takes to build a rate. Also, Jason's going to come up after that and talk about the rate impacts of the water treatment plant. I've got some other utility fee details. I'm going to go over what we learned from the City of Eugene with our meeting in March 8th, some local option levy information, and then our current status of the fiscal year 24 budget. And without further ado, welcome John, and hopefully we can share, or I won't mess this up.
How'd that go?
We see you.
Good. Can you see the PowerPoint as well?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, JC, and thank you, Mayor and Council. I will be brief. What we've done is lay out sort of the steps that it takes to establish a new fee, and in this case, more specifically, a public safety fee or rate. And these are sort of the typical steps to be done, whether it's internally or externally. And I'll go through these and then talk about the importance of each one and try to get at the issue that JC mentioned, the importance of linking the fee to the actual services delivered. So you kick off the project, and then you see that second step, what we're calling the revenue requirement analysis. One of the things that distinguishes a rate from a tax, and this is kind of a nuance, but it's important. A rate is a cost recovery mechanism. So you need to know what the costs are that you're recovering, and then you calculate the rate to recover those costs, which is different from a tax, which you can just set the amount, see how much revenue you get, and then budget to that revenue. So that revenue requirement step is really important when establishing a rate or a new fee, because that starts with, okay, what are the costs that we're trying to recover here? And you know, how much, it doesn't have to be the whole cost of public safety, it could be whatever portion of that you choose to recover from the fee, but establishing what that dollar amount is, and that can include operating costs, it can, personnel costs, it can include some capital, whatever the obligations are associated with public safety. The next big step we're calling rate design, and that another feature of rates that's very important and is different from taxes is there needs to be a nexus or a link between the amount that people are charged and the services that they are, or the benefits that they're receiving from that which they are being charged for. So that's really sometimes a head scratcher for public safety, because you don't know when you're going to need it unless you need it, and you don't know how much you're going to need. Most of the public safety fees around the state, and there are a number of them, have basically said, okay, we're going to say that the amount of benefit available to a customer is uniform per customer, whether they're commercial or residential. And so they just take the dollar amount and divide it by the number of accounts, and it is a monthly per account fee. If you were to vary from that type of, let's say, accepted, if not perfect approach, then you would need to have a real strong statement or some findings that linked the amount to be paid by each ratepayer to public safety, to the amount of benefit or service they could expect to receive from public safety. And that again is an important feature of a rate that distinguishes it from a tax. When you think about taxes, you have tax exempt folks who don't pay them but might still receive services. Taxes could be associated with property values that have nothing to do with the amounts of services received. So again, in rates, we're trying to establish that nexus. So those are really the most important two analytical steps when you're establishing the new rate or fee. And then you get into the sort of process steps, communicating it, whatever outreach that's to be done, public hearing, and adoption, and ordinance is required, of course, and some kind of documentation of the work that's been done. So, and usually the ordinance will lay out what that nexus is, or linkage between the fee basis, how it's charged, and and the services, basically, public safety. So I mentioned there are a number of these around the state, several of them in Southern Oregon. It's surprising, I guess, how much they vary. So Central Point is $2 a month for a single family residence or a commercial establishment. Jacksonville, we think, is 62, which is a combination of police and fire. That is a monthly per account rate. And then you see Talent and Medford also in there with their public safety fees. Medford has adopted that additional $298, but that won't take effect until July. So, but there's just a few around the area. So, you know, as far as the impacts of this fee and the type of revenue it can generate to be used for public safety, you can get a sense from these fees of the spectrum. And that's all of my prepared material. Any questions about that?
Any questions? Rob?
So what would the explanation be for the huge difference between Central Point's $2 and Jacksonville's $62 be?
You know, I really don't know, other than, you know, I think you'd have to look at the whole funding package, revenue from other sources into the general fund that they commit to police and fire. So I suspect Jacksonville and Central Point have made very different choices about how they commit that revenue to those functions and how much supplementary income they need from the fee in order to make up the gap. But I couldn't tell you in detail, and I'm sorry about that.
Rick, and then Vanessa, and then Joel.
Thank you for your presentation. So can you divide out the fees that you're indicating the grouping could include residential, commercial, industrial, and so forth? Is one method with different fees for each group, or the same fee for everybody?
And again, we haven't worked in detail with all four of these, but I know at least two of them are just straight up per account, and it's the same amount whether it's commercial or residential. You absolutely could develop different rates for those two customer classes or other customer classes, as long as you can justify the difference in service. For example, if you could show more calls on an annual basis per unit for commercial as opposed to residential, that would be a really strong justification for a different fee for commercial over residential.
And then that account classification, does that open the door for an opportunity for a nonprofit, like a church? There we could actually.
As a rate, yes.
It's a rate. Okay, last question. Could you also divide by the value, say the value of the business or the value of the home is $1 million or less, and then go 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, or?
So those types of ranges, I think, could be used again, as long as you could make that link. Anytime you get close to valuation, and I don't, whether that's property value or valuation of the business, then you're moving closer to a property tax. And I think, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I think you'd want to be eyes wide open about the risks of moving in that direction, and getting challenged on the basis that it was a tax instead of a rate.
I appreciate those comments, because I think it could be very complicated. Thank you.
Vanessa?
Thank you, John, for explaining the difference between a rate and a tax. That was very helpful. I do appreciate that. I wanted to know, is there any consideration for equitability in terms of a rate design versus, you know, those on the lower income scale versus those on the higher income scale, or even more frequent users of the system versus less frequent users of the system?
So we haven't seen that in public safety fees yet, at least to my knowledge, and we're still kind of struggling with it, even for, you know, water and sewer and the other more traditional established utilities, because rates are supposed to be cost-based and service-based. The most straightforward way is if you could show that those lower income or disadvantaged folks require fewer of those services, then it's pretty straightforward. That's been a difficult link to make. The easiest way to provide those kinds of rate reductions or exemptions is to fund them through an external source. So usually what you would do is you would provide rate relief for those customers, but you pay for it out of the general fund, which unfortunately is another burden on the general fund. But that's really the only way to keep the integrity of these as a rate without burdening other customers who shouldn't necessarily be paying more, so those customers can pay less, if that makes sense.
It does. Let me attempt to reframe my question. It seems as though with every consideration for a way to pay for public safety, it seems like there is a classification that is not paying. So I think what I'm looking for is there some type of equitability that ensures all users across the board are helping to pitch in for this. You know, an example right now, nonprofits are not currently funding. Maybe landlords are passing, you know, the levy fee onto renters, et cetera, et cetera.
Because rates are based on service provided, tax exempt customers are not exempt from paying rates. So yeah, this is an approach that everybody pays a share of public safety because it is a rate.
Thank you.
Joel, then Rob.
John, thank you. I'm trying to get the link here between the rate design and the revenue requirement analysis. So you may not know the answer to this because it's probably specific to Grants Pass, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So assuming that we just had a flat rate, and I know we can base it on traffic or size of water main or other things that we were already discussing. But assuming we had a flat rate of $1, how much revenue does that actually raise?
So without knowing the number of accounts, JC might be able to tell you that. But what I would hope is that instead of starting with the dollar, start with the costs that the city needs to recover from this rate. Let's say that's $100,000 a year.
Sure.
If you divide that by the number of accounts and divide it by 12, that tells you what the monthly rate is per account if you were to charge everybody the same amount.
So then let me rephrase my question. I just need to know the number of accounts.
Okay. And that's something I can't tell you.
I can answer that one. It's around 13,000.
13,000 accounts? Okay.
Is that all, Joel?
That's good.
Got your question? Okay, Rob?
Yeah, on the comparable fee chart that you gave us, it shows that Medford's waiting for an extra $3. It's going to be adopted in July. Can you tell us when the last increase was for each one of these towns? How long have they had these rates for?
I can, and I'll be doing this from memory. So, and Medford's is actually already adopted. It will just be implemented in July. I think Central Point was in the last 2 years, I believe. They went from $1 to $2. I'm not sure about Talent, and I'm not sure about Jacksonville. I think they had only the police for a long time and may have added the fire element relatively recently. JC, is that something you know?
You're right. Central Point and Medford, just within this calendar year, has implemented an increase of their utility fees as represented here on the screen. But I am not aware of Talent in Jacksonville and when the last increase was.
We think that Jacksonville is over 10 years old.
And so on Medford, the one that, they're waiting for one, do we know when the last prior increase was on the 942? Or up, to bring it up to 942, do we know when that was? How long?
It was also fairly recently. I mean, they may do annual inflationary increases there. But I don't know more beyond that.
I think part of it was they built a new police station too, or did something and that brought it on, if I'm not mistaken. That was part of it. Or they hired 5 more policemen or something. I remember reading about they actually hired more policemen and that's
Yeah, their utility fee is linked to, really primarily, a lot of it is linked to personnel. And they say with this fee, we're going to be hiring, it was a number of 5 FTE. Now it's, up to 27 FTE, that kind of thing. With then also secondary, some for infrastructure associated with the support for that.
Other questions? Rick?
So on your rate, could you differentiate between residential and everybody else, or you would have to best apply it straight across to everybody?
If you could show a difference in service provided, then you could differentiate by any number of customer types, but certainly residential and everybody else. The important thing is that you can show that they're getting a different amount of the service.
Okay, thank you. I think that'd be easy to do, and we could follow up on that. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, looks like we don't have any more questions for you at the moment, John, so thanks for being here and putting this together for us.
Thank you.
JC is taking the next handoff.
I'm actually going to pass this next part over to Jason.
The keyboard's not working? Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. I was hoping that JC was going to take this portion of the presentation for me, but he declined. It was all about money, so I thought
that was right up there, JC.
Right up his alley. So this is just a recap of the memo that we sent out a while back, talking about the rate impacts, potential rate impacts to the utility bill based on the current costs of the water filtration plant project. And as you can imagine, the project is still increasing in cost as inflation is continuing to take its toll. I'll be handing out a handout here shortly with the current cost estimate, which we received late March. We are meeting on Thursday and Friday of this week for value engineering, and we've assembled a really stellar team that is going to be coming in, and we're looking to cut $25 million from the budget. And when you think about that, these cuts, that just gave me goosebumps actually. These are not, we're eliminating a pump here or thinning up a wall here or doing something. We're going to have to cut processes to bring the project within budget. At the conclusion of that, we'll be back in front of you with a full report of what those impacts are. But right now, inflation is just carrying away with the project and we're not keeping up and we can't keep up. So we're going to look at what we can do to create a project that's a little bit different, but still meets the needs of the city. And if it's not, we're going to probably come back here and recommend that we hit the pause button and wait for the economy to stabilize. I don't think you're going to see the prices return to where they were, unfortunately. What we may see, though, is the interest rates return to where they were, which would be beneficial. We really need about 2.5% on the interest. So With that in mind, we will still fit within the same amount of debt that we are currently anticipating. And with that, we created a couple of scenarios for you. And the first is if we receive no additional funding from anybody, including the Oregon legislative appropriation, which we are testifying on April 20th, I believe, where there's a remote session on that. And then also if we do not receive the FEMA BRIC grant and we are forced to fund the remainder of the project, and that's $65 million through WIFIA, and the impacts that would have on that rate. And that would mean needing an additional 45% increase to the water rates, which would begin in 2024, roughly 4% per year for a number of years. And as you can see, it would take today's bill, which is approximately $100.55. And this is a fully loaded bill. I wanted to just show that so that it's not just the water component. This is your water, your wastewater, your stormwater, transportation, and franchise fees. And it would increase that to over $123.29. Not the option we would choose to select. Were we to receive approximately a $15 million appropriation from the state of Oregon, this is what we called our alternative one, and no additional funding from any other identified source, our borrowing would decrease to $50 million. That would still require a 16% additional increase to the water rates beginning in 2027. So it's out there a few more years, and a lot could change in that time period, and it would be roughly 3% per year for a 5-year period. And again, it would take today's bill of about $100 and increase that to $115. And then the wild card. Were we to receive both the Oregon legislative potential, the legislative appropriation and the FEMA BRIC grant, we would need to probably borrow no money for WIFIA. That really does provide the opportunity for us to reevaluate the water right in its entirety, water rate, and be able to probably look at a rate that was a decrease. So this just shows no additional increases to the rate except for CPI, and it would take the bill from about the $99 range up to $110.66. And so with that, I would take any questions on the memo that was provided.
Questions? Valerie?
My question is, when will we know about the legislative and the FEMA?
This is a really new process to me, so I'm not sure. BRIC, I know. We will hear in August. August of this year is when we'll find out on BRIC. The legislative one, we are going to be testifying before the Ways and Means Committee. I had to think about this, as this is really outside my wheelhouse. I'm going to be real honest. In reading all of that I've read in the budget, that they're focusing the budget in the state legislature this year, I'm not super hopeful, but we're going to be very diligent. We are going to tie it to the House priorities, which are homelessness and housing, and having water available for all of those things is key, but, their focus really is not on infrastructure. It is really on housing and homelessness, and so I don't know that they're going to be willing to fund that priority.
Brian?
Thanks, Jason. The WIFIA, what is the rate on that?
We just had this conversation on Friday.
Yeah, it's a 0.01% over the 30-year treasury rate.
Which is
and what is the
right
current
now?
treasury rate?
I think it's like 3.64.
Yeah.
It's around there.
I was thinking it was just under 4, so right in that range. We're well over 3.5%, and we need to be in the 2% range or less, or in that range.
So it could potentially take a fair amount of time for that rate to get to a place where it would be acceptable for us.
Yeah, WIFIA does have some added benefits also, though. There's a very long delay on repayment schedule. In addition to being, you can have a longer period. You can have a 40-year repayment schedule, but you can also have a 5 to, I don't remember the maximum year, after the project is complete to start repaying. You are paying interest, of course, but yeah, it could take years for that interest rate to come down. That's why we need to minimize that borrowing.
Yeah, he's right on the 5-year deferred. I think it's a 35-year max
Yep.
as the term
There we
of
go.
the loan. But just to let you know how volatile the interest rates are, when we had this meeting maybe like 6 months ago with WIFIA, I think the interest rate was above 4% at that
It
point.
was.
So it's coming down. At what rate is it going to come down? We don't know.
So that rate isn't locked in, it's adjustable as time goes on?
Yep.
That is correct. So at the point in which I believe we take our first draw is when they take
When they
the-
lock it in. Yep.
Oh, so at that point it gets locked in?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then it looks like from the slide that the current rate structure is $65 million deficient to pay for the plant, is that right?
So that's with all of those additional funds. The construction costs right now are sitting at, hang on a second, and this is fully loaded with contractor overhead and profit at $103 million, plus the $14 million that you've already authorized. And I'm going to hand you a sheet that gives you all of the costs. I just was holding that till I had a chance to explain it, which puts the total project cost at $117.7 as of March 20th.
Okay, and we're looking at the guaranteed maximum price is probably still about a year out?
I wish I could, it's just under a year. It'll be fall of '24.
Okay,
So
thank you. Fall of '24, so.
a little bit over a year, I
Okay.
believe that.
Okay.
As I was saying that, I'm going, fall of
All
'24.
right, thank you.
Yep.
Dwayne, then Joel?
Sorry.
I'm Dwayne.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
We had that meeting on Thursday, I know, it's okay.
Sorry.
So we had the meeting on Thursday,
Yeah.
where you and I and one of my constituents came in and talked to you, it was and you said you were trying to get it to the $80 million is where you're trying to show. That's 37 million shorter than what you're saying today.
Yeah, so right now, we're looking for is the amount that we have to borrow. We've already funded and received funds for quite a bit, so it's that additional amount that we're trying to get down. We need to get a minimum of 20 to 25 million out. An extra 30 would be beneficial.
And then my question is, I don't understand why you said it was that you wanted it, that you didn't like the price on it was $5 more in 6 years or 7 years.
Yeah, it was.
Why'd you say that? Just I'm not curious.
So it went from 100 to 124, and actually there'd be 2 more years of increase, so that was a $25 a month
$25.
increase, which is pretty significant.
In 6 years.
Over the 6 years, yeah.
And then the interest rate, what was it? I mean, what are you looking for in it? I mean, what is the normal interest rate?
It's hard to say. It's been running in the 2s for WIFIA.
What was that, 2 years ago when the interest rate for housing was like that too? Or is
Yeah.
what's a normal one?
So normally we would borrow about 1% over the treasury rate, maybe 1.5.
But what's normal? Like,
So normal, like
not
5
like
years
the
ago?
last pandemic time, what is the normal?
Yeah.
Like a home interest rate, a normal is like 4 or 5, that's pretty normal, but even though we're at 3 or 2.75 a year or two ago, but what is normal?
Yeah, I think over the last 5 years, normal probably would have been in the 3.5, 3.75. And that would be off a revenue bond, which is a little bit more.
3.75, so we're almost there.
We're getting down there. It's just at the dollar amount and the amount of years to pay back, that interest adds up.
But you're rolling the dice, I think, of trying to lock it in. You can't lock it in until you draw, so.
Correct, and so you're trying to get the best value of where you are at that point, and so the longer you wait, if rates are coming down, the better off
Or
the
they can go
overall
up
term.
too.
They could go up too as well.
Yeah.
As a realtor, I speak this term all the time, is you can't predict the market.
Very much so.
So I don't understand what the waiting is like, do we wait till we're so screwed that, I'm sorry to use that word, but that we don't know,
At the current rate.
We need water.
Correct, at the current rate and at the current amount that we would need at the $65 million as current conditions, it's almost unaffordable to take that loan out.
So our time, and as long as this keeps taking, and the more we've gotten worse on everything, it seems like.
Correct, so the longer we wait, the more we can take in our revenues as far as the water rate.
And kind of to illustrate your point, Counselor, we've been running numbers as we look at the cost estimate. They actually escalate those out to the time of the GMP, and it roughly is adding close to $350,000 a month because of the timing and where inflation is sitting today. So it is we need to hurry, but we also need to make sure that we can afford to hurry. So that's the catch-22.
But you're not looking to start till a year and a half from now.
We have to finish the design. They're designing as
Yeah.
fast as they absolutely can.
But I'm just saying, you're not looking to do a draw at the first draw until a year
No,
and a
we
half from now.
cannot. Yeah, correct.
So that's a lot of time.
Joel, then Brian, then Rick.
I was going to repeat one phrase, but I won't. So if we reduced WIFIA by $1 million under either scenario, that $1 million reduces the monthly payment by how much? What is the marginal impact of reducing the amount of money we borrow from WIFIA? So if we reduced it by $1 million, what would be it doesn't look like it's a very big impact.
$1 million won't be a big impact. We need to get 10, 20, $30 million out of that.
So $1 million will probably change it, what, 25 cents?
More than that, but boy, JC disappeared. Oh, I'm going in. JC's gonna.
It's the math
punch it up on
speed
the
round
ground.
all of a
He's
sudden.
going to calculate that for me?
Yeah.
Bless you.
But I was gonna
Bless
say
you.
1 million.
You just saved
is
me some time.
Not
Okay.
gonna be very much, but it is.
I'm
it
just
is
looking at the
significant.
margin, JC.
Yep. I was going, man. he was
Okay,
sitting
we'll
right
move on
there.
to
He
another question
disappeared.
and come back. Brian, go ahead.
How much are we currently sunk into the current project cost-wise?
We have signed task orders for probably, well, over 14 million, because that covers the design, the work on the membrane system, and probably a couple of million in additional task orders from Stantec through all of the preliminary work and site prep. I can get an exact number, but I don't, property was 5 in that range, and then site prep was another $500,000, maybe a
Okay.
little bit more.
I think I'd be interested in hearing the current cost to date, maybe minus site value.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rick.
I know in some instances on a home loan, you can lock in a certain interest rate, but I think it's limited to a certain amount of time. Is there that ability for us to do that and pay a premium for it, but the time frame may be too short and it doesn't work?
Yeah, I'm not entirely certain. I know JC's busy calculating. WIFIA is pretty rigid, and you do lock in when you finally sign that paper to that rate. And there is a one-time opportunity. And JC, I'm hoping you're semi-listening. If I remember right from our kickoff meeting with WIFIA, there is a one-time opportunity to refinance. Like if you sign all your papers and you haven't taken that first draw and the interest rate drops, you can sign at that lower rate. But once you start taking the draw, that's what locks it in. So there is that opportunity that we could sign up today and it could drop 3-4 tenths. And as long as we haven't made that first draw, we can still take advantage of that lower interest rate.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, he's ready.
So if you look at a 35-year loan, which this would probably be for us, $1 million at 3.5%, which is lower than what it is currently today, is about $50,000 per year. And so at $65 million, we're looking at a debt service payment of close to $3.25 million per year.
Okay, so and if you translate that then to a rate increase or decrease off the bill of our providers, how many providers did you say we had?
There's about 13,000, a little bit over.
13,000 providers. So you're looking at probably a 50,000 divided by 13,000, so about $3 for every $1 million taken off of that.
Right, but we'd also be evaluating what other capital projects and all the other things that
Sure.
go along with that too.
Sure. I just wanted a ballpark estimate. Okay.
Other questions? Brian?
So we're looking at a repayment period for this project of 35, 40 years. But it's my understanding that at some point within that 35 to 40 years, we're likely going to need to do some sort of plant expansion or some sort of capital project?
So that's a great question, Counselor. I don't believe so. That was one of my primary concerns when we were looking at only increasing the capacity by 2.25 MGD. I've ran the numbers. I've had another engineering firm review the numbers that I came up with, because not that I didn't trust our current design builder, but they said, absolutely, we'll get there. I looked at peak day numbers. I looked at peak week numbers. I've looked at peak month numbers, and we don't exceed that capacity for 40 years. So based on the growth that we've had. Now, can one giant user come into town and throw that all out the window? Absolutely. Absolutely. But based on current growth that we've seen in Grants Pass over my entire career, which is now 27 years, we're going to be fine well within that debt window. That was one of my key things. We were not going to compromise that we'd be still paying off Plant A while we're having to build Plant B, because I knew that the community couldn't afford that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question.
Valerie?
How about the water intake? Are we going to have to add on to the water, do something with the water
that
intake?
you will. When we finally have to expand the capacity, we won't have to during this project, but when you have to increase your capacity beyond that 22 and a half, it is going to require the addition of a new intake structure.
All right, this is all lots of good info. We're here to talk about public safety funding, so let's move back to that. And this is supposed to provide some background information for the utility bill.
Yes, and so moving back to the utility fee information, so this is probably something we haven't talked about yet, which would be the customer service direct charge to take in those revenues on our utility bill. We've estimated that to be about $105,000. So if you were to look for $1 million in revenue and we have a 3% delinquency, you would end up with a net of about $864,000 to go towards public safety. Now, economies of scale, if you increase that revenue to about 7 million, that 105 we think stays approximately the same. However, we do know when we add a public safety utility fee, we're going to get more calls, and ergo the service is probably going to swing probably a couple in the out years from the onset, because call volume kind of drives how we charge all the other utilities proportionately, just to try and keep it fair and equitable. So you could see that the $7 million potentially of revenue, we 3% of delinquency, and then taking off that same $105,000 as far as the charge back to the general fund to do that billing and collection for us. Kind of a weird time to take a break, but I just want to make sure there weren't any other utility fee questions before I move into the payroll tax and the information we got from the city of Eugene.
Questions about utility fee? Rick, then Vanessa?
Thank you, J.C. So on the delinquency, presently, do we hire somebody or sell the delinquency account and they get a commission to go out and collect those fees?
Yeah, our delinquency is relatively low. It's underneath 1%, so that 3% estimation is probably a little bit high, but not knowing what kind of impact adding this to the utility bill would have potentially. So yes, we do turn over after a certain period to collections, and then we get 60% back, I think is 100. They get to charge 40% on top of it. That is correct. Yeah, so we get 100% back if they do collect, and they get to, the collection agency charges another 40% on top of what is owed to us.
So that's been successful for us over the years?
Fairly, yeah.
Thank you.
Vanessa?
This question might be for Aaron. Do we have a timeline for the FCS group study, the rate design? I think, if I'm reading that memo correctly, an agreement was executed on March 17th.
So it was, but we have not actually started that. The mayor had indicated at one of the agenda setting meetings that she didn't think that the cost was there, but we can execute at any time. I really was looking for more feedback.
Yeah, we're looking for more feedback from the council, because what originally you were looking at is, oh, let's just do, just to take a look at rate study, ended up being, I think, a $76,000 project. And so we sent a memo out saying, hey, this is a $76,000 project. Do you want us to move forward with it?
Yeah, I thought we didn't have feedback from the council to go forward with that.
It was my understanding that the memo said that if they didn't hear a bunch of opposition by that date, that they were going to move forward. I thought that's what the memo said.
It may have concluded with that, but I did have a discussion with the mayor and council president, and it was, we were holding off on it. If you'd like us to continue with it, let us know and we'll get it out.
I'm also confused. It does say the fee for the proposed work is $74,850. Staff, in alignment with the recently adopted updated financial policies, will execute the agreement with FCS Group on March 17th. So that's where my confusion is coming from. I do have interest in moving forward on that.
Okay. Well, does anyone have concerns about moving forward with that, or should we move forward with that? Dwayne?
I just feel like staff is pushing forward on a rate fee hike, and personally haven't agreed to anything like that yet. But we have not, we are so far from behind and being on a levy for this fall. I know I talked about that already, so we could keep talking and talking and talking, but we're not gonna make this fall for a levy. A payroll tax, I don't know why we're talking about that, because I was told it couldn't happen anytime soon. So I feel like, just honestly, I know this is not your fault, but maybe it is, I don't know, but some of this is a waste of time, I feel like, and I'm just being honest about it. We need to do something about public safety, and we're talking about fees, and then staff is telling us they don't want to do fees for a water treatment. So I don't know who's running the show here. I'm really confused, Shirley.
So I want to take that on. Staff is not telling council we don't want to do fees or telling you anything. We're providing you with information and trying to answer your questions. At none of these positions today, we are making recommendations. We're providing you information based on what council was wanting to get.
But just a minute ago, we were told that staff said that they want to do fees for the water treatment. Well, I don't know if that's staff's position or that's the council.
We're providing you information on potential water rates based on the loans that we may get or may not get. This was not, it had nothing to do with a recommendation for a proposed rate change.
Water rates are pay for the service of the water treatment.
I understand that, but then you read the Daily Courier and they're saying, well, we're going for payroll tax and fees to public safety, and I'm like, I don't even know we voted on anything yet or said we're going to go a certain way.
We haven't made any decisions yet. We're just exploring options. I would say at any time the council wants to either pick an option to focus on or eliminate some from, the discussion, that would probably be extremely helpful for our staff. They're trying to provide all the options, and it is taking a fair amount of time, both for the council and for the staff. So if at any time.
But Aaron said the other day that payroll, I talked when I was in the meeting.
Point of order.
If at any time you would like to make it a recommendation to move forward with one particular option, that would greatly help this.
I'd like to recommend we move forward on a levy.
Rob.
So I think, and I totally get Dwayne's frustration with the speed of government, and we're the government that we're frustrated with. But, when we go back to Joel's question earlier, the number one thing, according to John, who was on the screen, the number one thing that we have to establish is the revenue requirement. And I don't know that the council's even done that yet. I don't think that we've decided on revenue requirement. Are we, so we're trying to, I guess, be careful because we're trying to be, in a sense, sensitive to the needs of the community and the likelihood that the community will accept anything. So we want to know exactly what they could afford or what we feel they could afford. So that's why we're looking at these different options. But we still have to come up with, at some point, a revenue requirement. And then, and I know that I like seeing where we can get more revenue from because, we'd all love to spend more, I guess, on all kinds of great projects for the city, whether it's public safety or other things. But then we also have to figure out what can people afford. But number one thing we still haven't done is the revenue requirement. And then, so we've got to circle back to that at some point fairly soon. But I appreciate the rest of the information so far.
Joel?
So I'm sketching my memory, and I just came back from vacation, so, and I'm 70 years old. Imagine those three things, so you can correct my memory if it's not correct. I think at our, one of our previous council meetings, we talked about the level of service we wanted in public safety. And in that, there was 3 different levels presented to us: keep it the same, increase it, and I believe one was either decrease it or increase it even more. And we chose the first increment of increasing it, and it had some staffing requirements with the fire and with the police, which then the staff calculated our financial requirements. Am I correct? Okay. And we said that was an iterative process. And as we go forth, so we do know, with all due respect to everyone here, we do know what, if we did increase the service, what the financial requirement would be. It's just not before our eyes right now. That was presented to us at a previous meeting, or might have been a memo. One of the things that strikes me, to go back, because it is an iterative process, I'm not sure we can afford to have that smaller increase, and maybe we ought to just keep public service right where it's at. And I know that's kind of painful, especially to some of our employees, but I think that's probably the fiscal reality of where we're at, and that should then drive our financial requirement and what we talked about earlier, where we incrementally increased it. Now, I stand corrected if my memory's faulty, let me know, but I think that's where we're at.
I think you hit it pretty good. The council did, or the staff did that day present, I think there was a $14.5 million need, and that would provide public safety at the same level that it's at, but it would pull out the money from the general fund, so it would recuperate, some ability to have money that we used to have in the general fund for other projects that we no longer have. $16.5 million would allow us to add 7 FTE for police and fire combined. And then there was kind of the shoot the moon option, if you will, that really, wasn't at all something that we were going to be able to pay for. So the council had indicated that day a preference for the $16.5 million option that would add in 7 FTE. And I would agree with you. At the beginning of that meeting, I felt very, that was a very moderate, increase, and I felt good about it. And by the end of that meeting, I felt like it was totally unattainable. So that may be a discussion that we all want to have. Is it worth, do you want the payroll tax part of this discussion right now? Do we just need to have the discussion about what we're shooting for? All right, let's have that discussion about what we're shooting for here, so that we don't spin our wheels talking about things that we're not going to do. DJ.
I'm happy to have that discussion. I agree with what you said, Joel, and also a little bit what you said, that $16.5 million seemed like a good idea. However, entertaining a growth option at this point, considering all the circumstances, I think is not wise. I think unmitigated growth funded by the general fund is the reason why we're in this issue. If we try to restructure our revenue program to pay for public safety, and we add in growth, I can imagine that being quite unsavourable to our constituency. If we can get away with this exercise and maintaining current level of service, right? That's a huge win. My mind right now is, how can we pull this off with a palatable revenue source from the constituency and maintain the current level of service without a reduction of level of service? I think, in my opinion, that's best case scenario that we have, that we're looking at. And I think that might be a combination of levy and maybe utility, but taking payroll tax out of the equation.
Joel. And I would add to DJ's message that it's iterative. So, it will go forward at the same level of service, just like before. That's subject to change as we move through it, either up or down. But right now, let's go down from that increase back to just staying with what we got.
Rick?
I'm also feeling our constituency needs to be informed. What are the consequences? One thing that concerns me is public safety in some respects is underfunded for the current level of staffing because they're having to cancel vacations, they're having to work overtime and so forth. So I want to see the figures, what's available if we went with the 16.5 million, what it would look like, and then base our decision whether we stay where we're at or increase the funding. Thank you.
All right, I know it's been suggested to take payroll tax off the table. Are we still looking at all the other options? Is there a particular option you want to focus on? Dwayne had mentioned levy only. DJ?
Sure. That recommendation to take payroll tax off is voiced by constituents that I've talked about. I'm finding delicate favor for utility fee and vehement opposition to a payroll tax.
Okay. Joel?
As we move forward, and this is premature, but I'll just say it out there, this is not the water treatment plant funding for emergency services, the Grants Pass Caveman Pool. The funding for paying down the amount that we're going to borrow on the water treatment plant could be offset if we increase the amount that we, or decrease the amount that we need to borrow. The offset then could be used for public safety, but that would require putting up to the, in my mind anyway, the option of putting up to the voters whether they want a caveman pool and whether they want to pay for it, and not have it come out of urban renewal, which would go to pay down the debt if we still want to build the water treatment plant, and the ARPA dollars that would go to the pool. Because right now, people are not voting on that $7 million for the pool. And that's a significant chunk of change, especially given where we're at with funding public services. And so in one mind, it says, do you want people to vote on public service, on emergency services, or do you want them to vote on the swimming pool? You know, and it's painful to me either way. I don't like talking about that, but it's painful either way. So that's just some thoughts. We don't need to make a decision today.
Brian?
I mean, we could have the people vote on every project in urban renewal, Joel, you know, so I don't know really what that's about, but just as a data point for...
Ashland did vote on it, and so did Medford.
Good for them. For the levy, just as a point, if we just went with a levy to fund the 14.5 million, we'd have to go from approximately, we're at $1.79 right now, and we'd probably have to be at around 304-ish, around $3 to get to just to this 14.5 million number, which is a $1.25 increase from the current levy, which is a huge amount. So I don't know the likelihood of something like that passing, but just as a data point, I wanted to let you know what it looks like if we were just to go with the levy.
Dwayne?
I think Rob was talking about, last time we talked about this, is probably looking at maybe the 245, 250. I think that was something we talked about. We know that's not going to cover it all, but $1.79 is not going to work. And I cannot see, without going back to the voters on the levy, at some point, at something, you know, and I would say this problem didn't start today. It started many years ago. So I could sit here and point fingers at it, but today we have to fix what the problem is, and we need to fix our system. So time keeps ticking, and we can bicker about it, but we have to have something. I would like to have something for the fall levy, for the fall ballot, and there needs to be something on the ballot. Now, if they vote it down, then we come back here and discuss what's going to happen, but something needs to happen. We need to start moving and getting people educated. We had a very good sheet, I think it was, out there what things cost. I would like to start, we even had some discussion at the last agenda thing with the mayor and the president, Lovelace, about start going out there and selling things. We need to start doing that stuff. I don't want to be here and it'd be July and we haven't talked to people about what our needs are. That's just how I feel about this. I'm not someone to procrastinate if you haven't figured that out yet. So I think we need to start moving forward on some kind of idea, and I think the 245 or 250 range is fine. Things have gone up and it costs more, and then we can figure out where we're going to get the rest of the money. That's just my opinion.
Valerie?
Well, at one point, part of the process from the very beginning was the stability. Part of the problem is that we put right now everything on property tax. And we also know the reality of it is that there are people who don't have property that don't pay for public safety. And so our whole purpose from the very beginning was to find some way to stabilize funding. And then we put a hope, some of us put a hope that maybe by getting money from the outside, some sort of a sales tax might help to stabilize. And that was thrown out. So here we are back where we go. If we just go straight to the levy, we're not doing what we were originally trying to do, was to stabilize funding by spreading it out and not having it all in one bucket. And you're right, what that takes is going out to explain to the people and giving them an option. Well, we can have it $2 and something because this is what it really takes to have the current level of system, or understanding that we will spread out the cost, we can instead put a fee and keep the regular levy. So you're right, that's what we need to do. And I agree that the payroll tax is not palatable no different than the sales tax was in our community. But I think what we need to do is get to those numbers as quickly as we can to say, if you want the services that you have now, and talk about the problems that we have, because we have big problems with retention, and that's the whole reason right now, how many overtime hours that they're working, and being able to retain our police force and retain our levels of service now. People don't know that their level of service, you just expect it. They don't understand what everything else has been sacrificed to keep that there. So I would just like to have, okay, what would it be if we want our current level of service? What does that look like as a levy? Then get an idea, okay, this is what we need beyond the $1.79, which is, I kind of liked John's comments today. Take that amount of money, divide it by the 13,000 accounts and say, or we could do the $1.79 and spread the use and stabilize, which I think it comes down to stabilization of our police force by putting a fee on the public safety to try to stabilize it and not having it all come from one source. So stabilize, to me, is what the original intent was, is to stabilize. And I'll have to admit, after going out and talking to the community and even to the business, they really don't understand how far under we are. So it's going to be a real eye-opener for them, and they may not buy it. And if that, unfortunately, may have to be, they learn it. I don't know. But I would like to see that. I would like to say, this is what it would cost on the levy. This was, if we had kept the $1.70 levy and put it on the, spread it out and stabilized it, this would be. And then have some place to start going out and talk, because it's going to take a lot of talking and a lot of educating to get us there. Brian?
Well, I can tell you right now, Valerie, the questions you want answered, if it's all on the levy, it's 304.
Okay.
That's the number. I'll let JC give the exact number. I'm just
Right.
kind of,
Reality.
bracketing
Yeah.
it for us.
Yeah.
And if we kept the $1.79 levy at the same rate, we're looking at $25 utility fee per month. These are rough, but that's kind of the ballpark we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because until those numbers get out there, people have no clue. And that's why I said right now, I just kind of like, we're running in circles. We're running in circles.
These are back of the napkin. I don't, I'm not going to stand behind these. I'm just doing them on the fly for us to talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Where are we at? Should we continue? We have I think this part is the taxing district correction. I'm not sure
Yeah.
this next part.
Would you like me to explain?
Well, yes, please.
Skip over the payroll stuff?
Skip over the
Got it.
payroll.
All right. So I made a previous error. The Road Community College does not go into the general government side, so there's another 55 cents, and that's all these slides were, is a correction of what we had previously put in a memo. And so with the new calculation, that is a total of approximately $798.76. And there's a little bit over $2 in room. And I want to say that as a generalization, because I had a conversation with Josephine County, is each property is individualized and compression is applied individually. And so it's not a perfect $2.01 and 2.24 for every property. But just to add to that $1.79, you could get up to approximately $3.80 in total. And that $3.80 would be close to, if not the $14 million that we've talked about previously.
But that would eliminate, if we, let's say we tried to go for that whole $2, that would restrict any of these other entities from being able to increase their levy.
That is correct. And since ours is a levy, it's subject to compression first.
Okay.
So in having some numbers submitted by departments for fiscal year 24 and then extrapolating potentially what that looks like for 25, here's what that looks like. We do have a net decrease of fund balance by a little over $5 million. The property tax on the permanent rate and levy revenues is about a 2.5% growth with a collection rate, which our average is about 93.5, which is conservative, but you also want to be as close as accurate as possible because we need all the funding that we can get. In fiscal year 23, we had a 1.5% increase on current property values and a 1.8% increase based on capital construction. So even in the last year, we didn't hit the 3% max of property valuation. So keep that in mind. I can't just throw in 3% or even higher because we're not even getting that currently. Potentially, to make the 30% fund balance requirement, there's a $3.3 million gap right now. Now, me and the city manager still have a city manager review this week, so these numbers aren't final, but these are current estimations based on what departments have submitted. In 25, there's an estimation of the levy amount. So that $16.1 million is if everybody 100% spent what they got. That would be the gap that we would have without the levy. In comparison, we shoot for a 6% savings. And so in that 6% savings, you can see these numbers all drop and it gets closer so that a revenue amount is the same in fiscal year 25 for the levy at $1.79. And your difference less the levy is closer to $11.5 million. And so that's why we really bank on that 6% savings by all the departments. And to go further, this is just public safety as far as a net income. So it's the same permanent rate, same levy. You can see all of their revenues is different. Other revenue equals grants, lodging tax, marijuana tax, services and annexation agreements, and the 911 IGR. And there is some one-time asset forfeiture money in fiscal year 24, which is why the revenues look higher in 24 versus 25. There's about $300,000, $400,000 that we'll be spending in that year, which is kind of why it creates that swing. And so again, this is if public safety 100% expended, you're looking at a net difference of about $7.2 million. And then with the 6% savings, about 5.3 in fiscal year 24.
What is this bottom row that we're looking at?
So the net difference to levy, we have a levy for fiscal year 24. It's the last year of it. So the 25 is if you took the 5.5 difference in 25 and added the $6.8 million of estimated revenues, if you kept the $1.79 levy, that is what that number is, that $12.3 million. So and just as a reiteration, that $14.5 million estimate from a month or so ago, that is 27, so a middle year. And so that $14.5 million isn't too far off of where we sit if we get 6% savings over the next few years and a $1.79 levy. Does anybody have any questions regarding that?
Questions, Brian?
Most of that flew over my head, but the
Yeah.
question I do have is, I see back on this, the first slide that talks about the 6% savings. Actually, yeah, there's the line that says 30% fund balance requirement, and it looks like in fiscal year 25, we're dipping below that even with the 6% savings.
That is correct. And I have a question coming up if you want to hold that thought.
Holding, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Rick?
JC, as we look at different options, do you have a ballpark figure of the 13,000 accounts? What percentage would be residential, just a ballpark?
Yeah, it's about 2,000 commercial, I think, and the rest are residential.
Okay, and the commercial would include all the nonprofits and so forth?
Potentially, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to have you step back, pick one of these slides. Let's pick the one that has, they all say local option levy at the top. Hey, that's, hey.
Sorry.
Okay, let's just start with that one, sure.
Okay.
Go through that line by line with us again.
Yeah.
Okay, so fiscal year 24, so making it through all the way through fiscal year 23, we expect the general fund to have about $13.8 million as a beginning balance. We also are estimating about $14.5 million in permanent rate and about 6.6 in levy. And then there's an additional $10 million in other revenues. So your other revenues is going to include like your franchise fees and things like that, which is approximately $6 million in total, which is where that $3 to $10 million difference comes in. All your expenditures are all of the departments. So that is planning, police, fire, economic development, downtown, and it excludes tourism because they have their own restricted revenue source. The 30% fund balance requirement is if you took the 35 million and multiplied by 30%. Our ending fund balance is if you took all revenues and subtracted the expenditures.
Okay, so you skipped, so we started the year with 13.8 million.
We end with 10.2.
And we end with 10.2.
Correct.
Okay, so we're losing 3.6.
That is correct.
And this number, the 11.3 million, is really what our goal would be, to have 30% would come to 11.3. So we're falling $1 million under.
That is
the
correct,
goal.
and that is not a goal, that's policy.
Policy, but it's not real money there, that, as opposed to the other line of 10.2 is the real money, and this one here is the plan.
Policy requirement is how I would
Okay.
say that.
And you bring up a great point, Mayor, that's a good point out, but the trend that you may see, it's not in a graph format, but the trend that you see is our beginning fund balance for fiscal year, our ending fund balance was 13.8 million, moving it into 24. Then we're projecting 10.2 moving into 25. Moving into 26, we're projecting 6.6. So as you mentioned, Mayor, we're losing about $3.5 million each year. And that's getting us further and further away from the required general fund requirement of our financial policies we have.
Yeah, as a gross statement too, if you just look at the public safety aspect, you look at gross revenues and gross expenditures, they don't match. So as a business model, typically you wouldn't set out to set up your business this way.
Okay, so when we go back to these bottom two numbers, that's showing us the difference to the fund balance requirement is that we're $1 million under where we're supposed to be on that carryover.
With 6% savings.
Okay, and then and if we move to the fiscal year 25 column where the number goes up to 4.8 million. That's showing us that we've lost another 3.6 million. Okay.
Yep. And the 11 just is the difference of the levy. So if you didn't have the levy in '25, it would be $11 million difference.
Right.
Just to show if you basically didn't go after the levy again.
Because I think one thing that we haven't necessarily done very well in these public meetings is illustrate what the problem is. So this illustrates part of the problem is that we're actually losing our reserves, and we will start losing them extremely quickly. And the other part is that we're spending, what is it, 4.5 million now out of our general fund to supplement public safety, somewhere in that neighborhood, a little over 4 million anyway. And what are examples of things that money would have gone to in the past?
That would probably be a service level and policy discussion of if you had more revenues, where you would put that.
Yeah, in the past, what we've done is when we've had the additional general fund, they've gone to the highest priority strategic plan goals of council. So there have been years where we had an extra $2 million in general fund, and we just targeted your top 10 strategic plan goals, and it might have been a gazebo in the park. It might have been the development of this or the implementation of that. And so that's where those $2 million would go in the past. And we don't have those funds anymore for those type of projects.
Right. I mean, I'll say for those of us who have come on board in the last couple of years, the link between the strategic planning and the budget has been totally unclear, because there hasn't actually been any funds to spend on those strategic planning items. So some of you who have been on the council longer have talked about this strategic planning as being an important aspect of the budgeting process, but for all practical purposes, for the last couple of years, it hasn't been. We don't come out of strategic planning with any money to spend on those, items. So I think that's, important to note as well.
Well, the other thing I think we need to recognize what came out of strategic planning was the permanent funding of emergency services. And that hits the bullseye.
Mm-hmm. All right, Val?
I was just going to say the costs of have significantly gone up in PERS. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have no control of that have also been increasing as time goes on.
Yeah, just to generically comment on that, at its gross basis, it's a math problem, right? We have 8% inflation, and our maximum property tax increase is 3%. We have a 6% savings that we shoot for, and inflation is 8%. So you're bound to lose in the current climate.
Point, we're working with, JC and I are working with department directors on a regular basis, and we are having difficulty trying to return that 6% because of what he just mentioned. It used to be attainable years ago, but with the external environment and the costs associated with everything that's not within our control, it's difficult to achieve.
Rob?
So, basically, we've been running about, we'll call it $3.5 million in the red per year. Is that accurate? Roughly?
Grossly, yeah.
Okay. So, and I'm not trying to overly oversimplify this, but some of us might actually be looking to simplify, and I might be one of them. So if we need to come up with $3.5 million a year just to maintain status quo, and we want to divide that among 13,000 utility fee users, what fee would that be, just so that we could break even with a $1.79 levy if that's what we chose to do?
I got about $22.50.
So $22.50 a month on each utility bill with a $1.79 levy essentially has us break even with this current level of service.
Right, and that's if everybody 100% expends it. So if we were looking to plan with the 6%, that number drops from the 3.5 to about $1 million-ish. But as far as hitting fund balance policy, but you're right, we're still losing 3.5. So it depends on what gradient scale. Are you going to try and cover the policy at 30%, or do you want to try and more or less break even year in, year out.
So JC, I also wanted to, I don't want to, I like what Councilor Pell's trying to do is simplify it. I don't want to complicate it, but when you said $20-some, were you saying per account?
That is correct.
Okay, because I came up with $11 per month increase based on transportation fee methodology. So it depends on what your methodology uses. If you did what we did for the jail utility fee back in 2013, in order to make up that 3.5, you'd be looking at $11 a month, basically. Or if you did it per account, you're looking at $20-some a month.
And that's where the rate design and the fairness, I guess, of how you want to break it down, where transportation, a single-family residential home pays less in proportion than a commercial site. Because in theory, your Fred Meyers are going to get more traffic, and ergo, they pay more.
DJ.
Sure, Rob, I think that question that you just asked really refocuses the conversation, gets us out of the weeds a little bit. I think it also substantiates my claim that I made earlier that if we can escape this exercise without a reduction of level of service, we can count that as a win. But I think we should put that in the pile of the information that we're going to need here coming up, because it looks like we're narrowing down to levy and rate. And it's looking like we're trying to entertain some sort of sliding scale. We're going to bootstrap these things. How much would the levy increase? What would the implications be on the utility rate? That's where we need to get at so we can start making some decisions.
Yep, I agree. Aaron.
If that is concurrence of council, I appreciate Councilor Pell and Councilor Fazer trying to put this together. We will work on, if you'd like, an upcoming meeting here quickly, because if we are going to do a levy or do something unique, different, timing is not on our side at the moment. We will bring together some kind of sliding scale opportunity for you at the next presentation to where, okay, if $1.79, here's utility fee. Once you have, and we'll have a couple different targets. Well, if you go to 210, that means utility fee will slide down to, or something like that. So we can provide you with some options to sort of pick and choose what your comfort level might be or what you might want to look at.
And if I could suggest staff's capability of putting that information be the rate limiting step of when it gets on the agenda, because as you mentioned, time is of the essence.
And what we would also do from that standpoint, just to provide continued clarification, what I've heard, and I just was wanting to get consensus on this all, it's for the same level of service, not a reduction, not an increase, but just the current level of service maintaining.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we also determine how many full-time police officers that is, so that we have that, so we can explain what the current level of service is to people who want to know what exactly that looks like.
I think we can still entertain it at the $16.5 and the $14.5 million levels, because the math is going to be very similar there. So I think then we can make that decision once we see the dollars.
And I'll ask another question here later, but maybe something to think about as far as a discussion point on the call to action is maybe narrowing down what nexus or level of service you want to be doing. Is it going to be a flat fee where everybody is just per account basis, or are you going to try and use a model that tips it depending on maybe your residential, commercial, industrial? And so that'll change the numbers and the calculations and who pays what as well. So it's hard to do that sliding scale if I don't know the variables in which you're shooting for.
That's a good point. And when I was thinking in my mind, I was thinking of going back to the utility fee we used in the past, which was the transportation fee. But if council wants to look at it per unit or meter size, then that would make it a more complex, just more work to be done.
Is there a model that you're interested in hearing about besides the traffic? Dwayne?
I was going to say the transportation one was what I would want to see. I mean, and the only reason is, you know, I was out with, I know it's a small story, but with a big renter and does HUD and all that stuff, and he says, I always have to push it down to my renters. So I would like to give the least burden on people renting and homeowners as possible. I just, how I feel and what I'm people talking to. And so, I mean, I know other people brought up the big people that don't pay taxes and this thing should be paying more. And I'd have to say I agree with them. The hospital should probably pay more than the average person that's just trying to survive in this town. So, my feelings.
DJ?
I think a tiered system makes sense, but I would hate to direct staff to, because that takes a lot more time, a lot more effort. We saw today a lot of time and effort on the payroll tax. Thank you for doing that, but we said never mind.
I know.
But that's a really difficult question to answer. For me, without seeing the numbers, a tiered system makes sense the most. But then again, that's without all the information that staff has spent time to prepare for us. So I'm kind of shooting in the dark on what it feels like as far as a fee structure goes. Is a tiered system makes sense.
No, and I'll just kind of reiterate maybe what John talked about too. If we have a transportation study and model, and if we can create that link to the service that public safety is a very similar service, then we can use that study and that rate structure to be the basis of it. But if you're going to try and do something new, slide the scale to more to commercial versus residential, you're going to need 4 to 6 months of a rate development to make it as fair and equitable if you're going to try and mess with some of the variables.
Yeah.
I understand. Thanks for that recommendation. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Does anybody want something other than the traffic-based model? Brian?
So you just said that if we do it based on commercial residential, that's going to take longer?
Yeah, so we would need to come up with a definitive, explainable, legally backed way as to why we are charging more to commercial versus residential versus a model that already maybe, like transportation, splits that up based on usage.
Wouldn't it be as simple as taking the number of commercial accounts and the number of calls and the number of residential accounts and the number of calls and then dividing it and say per unit, commercial properties have more calls than residential? I think that the numbers would work out that way and it would go pretty quickly.
It's a little bit more complicated than that because multifamily would be at probably a different tier structure than your single-family residential. And so you go through the account types and it makes it more complicated.
Yeah, and commercial would have the same argument. Cities that have done that in years past before they've gotten honed in on what to do have been challenged for implementing something relatively simple when it comes to a methodology. You have to be really succinct or you open yourself up to liability. So it would require, like JC said, if we did something different, we really would need to do a study, 4 to 6 months at least, to get something to where it may be defensible for us to implement.
Okay, and would that be a part of that FCS thing we were talking about earlier, or is that a different study?
Not the water rate study. It would be its own individualized study.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and we'll move forward with the FCS study for the $74,000. That's just for water, but it would be something similar, but it would be for public safety.
Okay, thanks.
Valerie?
I guess I'm confused now about the FCS study, because I did hear Brian and Vanessa say that they wanted to do that, but I did hear from other counselors earlier on when we went to the discussion that were unsure of whether they wanted to do that. So I think that it might be a good thing to bring back to the council before.
And that's why I was asked to sort of just put it on hold for the moment, and so I don't know where you want to go with that. I'm waiting for direction from you then.
Well, I would say just because it was a memo, I think there was people who had questions upon it before moving forward. So I'd like to have it brought back to a workshop before we made a decision.
That's a meeting to have a meeting. I'm sorry, Valerie. I respect you and your opinion, but I think the information's there, and I think a poll at this point, presuming we read the memo and our willingness for the study, would be appropriate at this time.
I guess because it was just thrown up just like that without rehashing it, I'm not sure off the top of my head why I can say. I just know how much time and energy it took, and a lot of in the last time that we did that study, I mean, we're talking tons and tons and tons of information and restructuring, and it just kind of seemed a little overwhelming as to whether that was really necessary. So that was why I questioned whether it was, and I think I heard from Rob as well, is what exactly are we getting for this $73,000? Are we just throwing it one more time at one more consultant? What's the purpose of this? And to me, it doesn't really affect what we're doing and trying to get done right now. So that was my question.
Rob?
Yeah, I think at one point, I know that why I might have been interested in a study like that is we were trying to get an idea of what would be a reasonable amount to ask the public as an increase to be able to pay for more public safety or devote to public safety. I think that was kind of the original intent of looking at that type of study, and then we expanded it out. But I think that at this point, it seems as though we've kind of narrowed our focus on how we might try to fund public safety. I don't know that it's worth necessarily spending the $73,000 to go forward with a study that we may not need at this time, or it may not be a top priority at this time. It seemed as though, like I say, at one point we wanted that to help us establish public safety funding, but I think we're kind of, maybe as of this meeting, we might kind of already have that in our rearview mirror, how we're likely to want to spend it, so, fund it rather. So I don't, to me, $73,000 right now for that seems like too much.
So just to clarify, the FCS study with the memo that came out and for with the March 15th deadline was for just looking at water rates associated with the water utility and looking at, is there a different way to fund the water treatment plant, the water treatment facilities and everything, with maybe a different base rate, or how do you calculate that? That's what that study's about. So it's specifically just to the current water rate. You've heard, like, say for instance, Mrs. Brown come up and talk about, well, let's have more units in your base rate, and we've had people say, well, let's have less units in your base. So that kind of study, that's what that study was for.
Yeah, so the study would actually be about the water rates, not related to public safety. So with that in mind, first of all, does anyone have concerns about moving forward with the water rate study if it's specifically about water rates? DJ?
Yeah, if I could just share my concern. So I see these is inextricably linked, because what happens with the rate study for the water treatment plant is going to have direct implications on my decision about rates for public safety. And so therefore, I'd like to see it.
So you want it to happen. Okay. Rob, do you stand by your concern that you don't want to pay for it, or?
Yeah, I understand how I believe that they are inextricably linked. However, I don't think that that's necessarily going to change how it appears as if, we were concerned that that the public could end up with huge additional fees on their water bill for both water and public safety. So we were concerned that both of those things are going to be added at some point, and we want to know how viable it was to ask the public to pay both. I think that we've already, it seems as though we're moving in a direction to be able to fund public safety kind of regardless of how much the water treatment plant is going to cost us. So I don't know that, I get that they're linked, but I think in some ways we already broke that link a little bit today because we're moving forward potentially with transportation methodology. So I don't know how linked they are at this point if we're moving forward as we think we are as of today.
Okay, does everybody else want to move
So
forward?
yes, I am standing by my, not to spend the $73,000 at this time.
I don't mean to second guess you there, I just, after the explanation of it being the water rate structure, we had decided earlier, it had been apparently stated in the memo that if there weren't issues raised by March 17th, we were going to do this water rate structure. So if anybody wants to stop us from doing the water rate structures study, speak up, I guess, otherwise that's going to go forward. Val?
You asked anybody who wants to stop it from moving forward, because I feel like we're just going to get more, I just don't think it's relevant to what we're doing right now. And I went through years of that study before, and I know how they even came back and discussed Mrs. Brown's response of saying, put more in the base rate, and we went around and around with it. So I think it's just a distraction. So I'm going to vote with Rob and say, no, I don't want it going further.
Okay. And Joel as well. Okay. So at this point, let's have a motion on whether or not to move forward with doing the water rate structure study.
Can I make a comment first?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Thank you. So the whole reason this came up initially was because we were looking at potentially restructuring the rates because our rates right now are weighted very heavily towards base rate and very light towards per unit rate. And so that was kind of the beginning of the whole conversation. And it came through, this actually came through strategic planning. This is on our strategic planning list this year, if you all recall. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with public safety, and it doesn't even necessarily have to do with the water treatment plant. It has to do with the affordability of the water rates for the public and their ability to affect that affordability by their use. Because right now they have very little ability to affect bringing their costs down by using less water and things like that. So, but I just wanted to remind everyone that this was in our strategic plan, and I thought we were trying to follow our strategic plan these days.
Rob?
Just responding to that, I can agree with everything you just said. I think the additional information as far as how much the study was going to cost gave me sticker shock. I had no idea that it was going to be $73,000. You know, it seemed like it was a relatively simple ask that it turns out maybe is not so simple. So that's my disconnect, is that I didn't realize it was going to cost that much.
And I would agree with you, that number is higher than I anticipated it would be. Maybe, I don't know if there's an opportunity for us to narrow the scope to bring the cost down, but I definitely would like to get the information from that study so we could potentially make rate changes based on the information we get. Is there any ability to narrow the scope to reduce cost?
So the scope is pretty narrow. The consultant has to get the last several years worth of individualized customer data to do pretty extensive analysis. They look at who is using how much water when. That way you know, as you start building your rate structure, what revenue you can expect to receive, right? Because if we don't know that you, for example, get 2 units of water every month or 10 units of water every month, it's hard to predict what the actual revenue will be based on the tail end. So they do a lot of analysis around that. I don't remember from the scope of work, because I don't have it in front of me, how many potential rate models that would generate, but generally it's, you know, 1 or 2. As Councilor Lovelace said the last time, we ended up going through, I think, 5 or 6, and we just modify the contract to come back. Once the base data is updated and in there, updating the model is a lot less expensive of a proposition. But I'm not sure that there's much. That also includes re-looking at the wastewater rate. And the reason for that is if you change the rate, which then changes the water consumption pattern, that also changes the wastewater revenue. And we have to make sure, because we've already taken out debt on the wastewater side, that that revenue doesn't change significantly. So that's part of the reason also that it was that much more.
Thank you.
DJ?
Well, now I don't know what the heck to do.
Okay, well, it sounds like today, we're not ready to have you go forward with the water rate study. If somebody wants to bring that back up at another date, we'll do that. Let's move on to public safety, or move back to public safety. We were talking about whether or not anyone had a different model than the transportation traffic model that they wanted staff to look into for utility rates regarding public safety. Nope. Okay, so.
Just as I can bring the flat model potentially forward, that's not too hard of an ask.
Yeah, we can divide by 13,000, right?
Right, and then the other one that is popular around the state is water meter size, which we have that data, and so
Okay.
that's easy.
Perfect.
To pull out.
That would be great, thank you. And so the next time we talk about this, we are going to take a closer look at just the levy and the utility fee options, it sounds like. Yeah, we're almost to agenda setting, so our agenda review. So anything further on public safety for today?
I actually do have 2 more slides.
Oh. You went there.
And getting back to Brian's question earlier, about being underneath the 30% fund balance policy. So as we look at the current fiscal year 24 budget, yes, we are not completely done reviewing all the numbers, but what was submitted, we're approximately at 21.18% of ending fund balance for fiscal year '24. And that's assuming all appropriations are spent. And so historically, we give 6% back, and so if 6%, you're going to get closer to 27%. So there's an estimated $5.8 million of fund balance decrease, which we kind of went over in previous slides. And assuming all appropriations are spent, and 6% savings is about $2.3 million. The public safety total budget is almost $32 million, and a 6% savings is almost $2 million, with about $7.2 million for general fund support needed for public safety. Which leads us to the call to action. I did put council's discretion, but obviously in a timely manner as we start budget conversations here in May, which is less than 30 days away. So we're looking for council direction to receive more information and or have staff delve deeper into funding source prioritization by council, which I feel like we have enough to go forward in the next public safety funding conversation. But 2 is to get council direction on the preparation of the fiscal year '24 budget. So I kind of laid out a couple options here of A is to change the general fund balance policy. B, allow for a one-time balance budget underneath the fund balance policy for the general fund in hopes that the savings will end within policy. And then C, meet the general fund 30 to 40% fund balance policy where A, staff would make recommendations and cuts to get there. And B, we do a series of council workshops on decisions to be made, which we're running out of time, and so this would need to be a timely decision.
Joel?
I vote for C. Keep it the same.
Anybody else want to jump in? Dwayne said he agrees with that. Vanessa is shaking her head. Okay, yes. DJ, yes?
Just as a generalized, C means that we will be making a $2.3 million-ish cut. There's not a lot left in the budget.
I know.
We got rid of a lot of the discretionary dollars in the fiscal year '21 exercise. So what you're ultimately looking at are people.
Okay, so you don't have an option to present it with a deficit?
That is B.
That's B.
But as budget managers, we want to make sure it's our responsibility to provide you with a balanced budget. That's as a budget officer, that's my responsibility. That's JC's responsibility. We will provide you a budget within all your financial parameters. But what we're saying, if we do that, there will be about a little over $2 million cut, which is FTEs, which we'll be presenting to you. But so that's what we'll do if that's what council wants to make happen. Because we're not recommending any of these, we're just saying in order, so.
Sounds like that's the direction for now. Rick?
So then if we want to maintain or go for the staffing level we want, I don't want to say produce a whole different budget, but how do we observe that?
That's the question. So that's
Separate
more
memo?
of A and B. So A, you could reduce the fund balance policy from a 30% bottom to 25, 20%, right? The difficulty with that is you're never going to probably get back up to 30% because it's going to be hard to put that money back into reserves. Option B, what it does is it gives you time. So it probably gives you 12 months. So what I would probably, if you're going to go down the current status of what we give the city, we would adopt that budget in June, and then as soon as July starts, we start having the conversation of what needs to be reduced as far as service levels.
All right.
I want to add with option B, there's still question on, unless there's some big enough cuts to make up revenue in excess of what we need, we will still never get back to the 30 to 40%. Because unless things majorly change in the external environment. So really option C is with the way I'm projecting it out, and I think JC would agree, is option B would be extremely difficult to get back to our financial policy if we just do it even for 12 months.
I think it's more of the hope of a revenue source also comes in with option B and movement.
Joel?
So the fiscal year also does not coincide with taxes, right? We got 3 months of operating without the property taxes coming in, and 3%, or 3 months of 12 months is 25%. And that's where that 30% comes from. So, I mean, you don't have much slack there. Otherwise, you run out of money, you can't pay people.
Yeah, and there's a reason why general fund is the highest in our reserve policy of 30 to 40% versus maybe fleet or something, which is 15 to 25 or whatever, because we do have to float the expenses over until November, December each year.
And I will say, not everybody's fund balance policy for the general fund is 30%. I think Ashland is 25, and I come from City of Albany, that was around 5% as their bottom. So there are other entities that have lower fund balance policies for their general fund, and they end up going negative for a short period in the year through, and so the other funds kind of float that cash flow, because all financial reporting we're looking for is actually the June 30th number. And so most people view that small dip as a negative is mitigated by the ending of the year of June.
All kinds of hands here. Dwayne, then Rob.
I just want council to remember this, is that's what happens when we take from the general fund. We've been stealing from the general fund, and eventually it's caught up to us. And now people will have to pay the price, and that's very difficult that we did this to ourselves as a government. And you would never run your business below 30%, then how do you pay your bills? So, I mean, there is no option. There is no A or B. There is only C. That's just my thoughts on this. There is only C. The other two are not negotiable. You can't do that.
Rob?
So, Aaron, when you say that essentially we have to, or and Joel also mentioned, that we have to float basically float our expenses for 3 months or whatever from the July to November, I'm not sure if I understand that. So taxes come in to the county in November every year. How are they dispersed to us? Are they dispersed to us monthly? Are they dispersed to us once a year?
Yeah, so he's talking about the start of the year is July 1. And so we don't get the first tax turnover until November. And so the float comes in needing to operate July, August, September, and October. And so of the 4 months, that's where that 30% roughly comes in.
But in November, December, we get the whole year's amount, right?
A large majority, it's not the whole year's.
It's just called, I would call it budgeting rather than floating, but yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Joel?
So the only other question I had was the 6% savings, and that's been rather unique to this government organization, and it's not a bad thing. But I was wondering, moving forward, I'm not sure that it's appropriate, because what we're doing is saying, okay, it's going to cost this much, but we're going to fund it you could look at it this way. It's going to cost this much, but we're going to fund it at 6% over, so we can save 6% because we can actually do it at a cheaper price. Now, that's not what's been happening. What's been happening is the manager has been using that as an incentive for the staff to save money, and they have saved money. But as a budget tool, as we move forward, maybe we need to look at that. Maybe it needs to be 3% or whatever. The other thing is, if you get rid of it, it doesn't solve the long-term issue at all. All it does is help solve next year. So it's not a panacea, but it's just unique to this government that we budget that way.
Vanessa? No? Okay. Well, it sounds like that might be something you want to take up at the budget committee level, both the 6% and the general fund balance policy, if you're so inclined. But it sounds like for today, the direction from the council is to prepare the budget with the standard 30%.
Okay.
Okay. Agenda review. So we have added today two things, well, I guess I'll go over the meeting first, and then I'll mention that. So Wednesday, we have a meeting, the public hearing regarding the U-Haul Comprehensive Plan Map and Zone Map Amendment, and another public hearing that has to do with a property line vacation at 1439 and 1445 Northwest Washington Avenue. We also have a right-of-way vacation on K Street to consider. We have a resolution that would amend the ARPA public infrastructure for affordable housing grant at Glencrest Cottages. A motion that would acknowledge the bi-monthly investment reports for January and February. We have appointments to the Historic Building and Sites Commission and the Urban Tree Advisory Committee. And then our next regularly scheduled workshop isn't until the 17th. So that's where I was going to ask you. We have two items today that we've talked about. One is the Fourth Bridge and looking at the transportation plan, and the other is coming back to public safety. So at this time, we don't have a meeting scheduled for Monday the 10th or the 24th of April. I should have asked you, JC, what your timeline is. How long do you need to come back with some public safety funding, numbers regarding the utility fee? Probably more than 1 week?
I mean, I'm looking at your schedule, it's pretty daunting. I could be probably ready by April 17th.
Okay, well, the 17th has quite a bit on it, so I was thinking of asking council, I think we should add back a meeting on the 10th or the 24th. But the 10th is, the 10th is only a week away, so.
I can do my best.
From a time perspective, maybe we could do the 17th and move a couple of these items into a new meeting instead, and maybe on the 24th or 21st or whatever that other date is. That'd be great. That could be an option.
Okay, we could do that, although some of this stuff is involving partners that we've already invited to the 17th. Anyway, are you interested in adding back a meeting? Do you just? Yes. Yeah, I think we have to. It's better to not put it off till May, and you have plenty of stuff going on in May. I'm thinking of adding a meeting on the 24th. Okay.
I'm looking at the agenda, and you look forward at workshops. We don't have anything scheduled for May. I don't see anything that couldn't be moved to have that meeting on the April 17th. Public safety takes precedence. I think we should just have our bi-monthly meetings and rock and roll.
Well, I think it does the Parklet program and the Welcome Center remodel, I think, were two things that we kind of have action items to move them forward for this summer, so there is an effect of delaying them. But partly we haven't scheduled out till May because we know things like public safety are going to take repeated meetings, so we have been trying to hold some space, but I'm not sure that I want to make us wait until, it's one more week, I guess, if you want to just wait until May 1st and put those two items on May 1st. April 24th?
I don't think the public safety can wait any longer, and I think the county's waiting for us to make a decision on the Fourth Bridge, so I think we need to see those as soon as possible, and I don't think waiting until May is the right time.
Okay, let's put those both on April 24th then. Is there anything else that anyone wants to add? All right. Motion to adjourn? Valerie moved to adjourn. Is there a second? Vanessa with the second. All in favor of adjourning today, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll see you on Wednesday night.
Okay, so we did add a meeting here.